I woke up in some dark forest, hurting all over, barely able to move. I could hear two men talking nearby. Their language was strange, not English, but somehow I understood every word. Then one of them said he wanted to eat me. That snapped me awake fast. My name is Glenn. Back in my old life, I came from a martial arts family. I joined the military after high school, served in special forces, ran assassination missions abroad. I'm not the kind of person who gets kidnapped without noticing. But everything felt wrong. My body wasn't mine. The men wore medieval-looking clothes. One had a revolver and a dagger on his belt. Memories that weren't mine flooded into my head. Magic, dragons, elves, dwarves, steam engines, kingdoms. I had transmigrated into the body of a guy named Dylan Nabankru, a rich merchant's spoiled son. His father went bankrupt, then his parents were murdered. Dylan drifted around broke for months before settling in a cheap house in some creepy remote area of the Zane Kingdom. This morning, someone knocked him out from behind on his way back from buying food. That's when I took over. The big one, bushy beard, hook nose, walked toward me laughing. He kicked me earlier and thought I was finished. He reached out to shove me down. That was his mistake. I struck his throat with my knuckle, fast as a snake. While he choked, I pulled the dagger from his belt and slashed his throat open. Then I grabbed his revolver, used his body as a shield, flipped the safety, aimed, and shot the second guy hiding in the shadows. One bullet, right through the head. I pushed the big guy aside and checked my stomach. For wounds, barely healed, and one had torn open again, bleeding badly. These two bastards must have cut me up while I was unconscious. Then I noticed the bearded man was still alive. His face was changing, his jaw pushing forward, black fur spreading across his cheeks. He was a werewolf. I pointed the revolver at his forehead and pulled the trigger. Click. Empty. I grabbed the dagger and pinned his head down, sawing into the wound on his neck. He was half transformed now, incredibly strong. His wolf jaws clamped onto my left wrist. The pain was terrible, but I kept cutting. If he'd had his full strength, I would have lost my hand. Finally, I separated his head from his body. He stopped moving. I pulled my bloody wrist free, then ran over and cut the other one's head off too, just to be safe. After that I collapsed, breathing hard, heart pounding. I patched myself up as best I could, then dragged myself toward home. What I didn't notice was that my fingernails had briefly turned into black claws before shifting back to normal. The forest wasn't far from the road, so I didn't get lost. My vision kept going blurry and my body felt like jelly. I wanted to just lie down and sleep right there, but Dylan's memories told me this area was dangerous. If I closed my eyes out here, I might never open them again. It was fully dark now. A round moon lit the road ahead, but it didn't make me feel any safer. I passed a broken, tilted sign that read, Bayek. This was the town where Dylan had settled. He thought he got lucky finding such a cheap house. He didn't realize why it was cheap until he actually moved in. The town at night was dead silent, suffocating silence. I walked as quietly as I could on the stone road, weeds growing tall between the cracks. Everything looked abandoned. Finally, I spotted my house, squeezed between two bigger ones, vines crawling up the walls. It was a shabby two-story place with a small garden and a storage shed barely bigger than a doghouse. Almost there, and then loud barking exploded out of nowhere. Nearly scared me to death. It was a big, muscular bulldog from next door, baring its teeth at me. The neighbor was some tall old man with a bad temper who liked to bully Dylan. He'd walk into Dylan's house and just take things like they were his. The dog was the same, always chasing Dylan, tearing up his clothes. The dog sniffed the air and its eyes lit up. It smelled my blood. It started licking its teeth and moving closer. This thing wanted to eat me. I gripped the dagger and stood still. When it lunged from 2 meters away, I sidestepped and drove the blade into its neck in one clean arc. The dog hit the ground twitching. I noticed something strange. My strength had recovered quite a bit. I should have collapsed from that move, but I stayed on my feet. I didn't bother looking at the dying dog. I went into the yard, found the key under a stone, and let myself in. The house smelled a little moldy. I didn't care. I dragged myself upstairs, pushed open the bedroom door, and fell face first onto the bed. My nerves finally loosened and I blacked out. At some point during the night, half asleep, I felt a crushing hunger but was too exhausted to move. Just before I drifted off again, I thought I heard something chewing outside my window. Through the moonlight, I could make out a thin, tall shadow swaying outside the glass. A long, slender limb scraped slowly across the wall. Whatever it was, it had claws. I woke up starving. The hunger was like nothing I'd ever felt. It was destroying my ability to think. I ran to the kitchen and tore it apart. Leftovers, raw vegetables, even moldy food. I shoved everything down my throat. The hunger only eased a little. This didn't make sense. I'd only gone without food for one day and night. It shouldn't be this bad. Then I noticed something else. My body felt stronger. When I stood up, there was real power behind the movement. I touched my arms. The muscles were firmer and noticeably bigger than Dylan's used to be. Was this some kind of body enhancement from transmigrating? I had no idea, but food came first. I searched the whole house again. Nothing left to eat. The town of Bayek had no shops. Residents always traveled to other towns to trade, and that was a full day's trip. I barely had any money left either. While I sat on the couch trying to figure out what to do, I heard a familiar voice shouting outside. Torre, Torre, where are you, baby? It was the old man next door, calling for his dog. I smiled. I stepped outside and saw the old man on his lawn, calling for his dog. He turned and saw me, started to say something, then stopped. He just gave me a creepy smile. The old Dylan would have run inside and locked the door. But I smiled right back. That threw him off. He grunted and went back into his house, slamming the door. I looked at the spot where the bulldog had died last night. The body was gone. I crouched down and found faint blood traces. Something had licked or wiped the area clean. So there really was something roaming around at night. I'd have to look into that later. First things first, I was starving. I went to my storage room and found a wooden stick. Gave it a few swings. It felt decent enough. I grabbed it and headed next door. The old man had a gun, so I couldn't be careless. I hopped over the fence, walked up to his door, and knocked. No answer. I knocked again. Nothing. That was strange. I expected him to come out swinging. I yelled through the door, told him I had something to discuss, promised I wouldn't hurt him. Still nothing. Then I tried a different angle. Don't you want to know where your precious baby went? I heard something clatter inside, but the door still didn't open. My patience ran out. Fine. Don't blame me for breaking in. I backed up and kicked the door open, then immediately dodged left. A gunshot went off right where I'd been standing. The old man had been waiting with his hunting rifle. He didn't expect me to dodge, and while he tried to reload, I was already inside. I swung the stick hard at his head. He blocked with the rifle, but I drove a fist into his gut. He flailed the gun around wildly, but that kind of thing doesn't work on someone with my training. I ripped the rifle from his hands and kicked him away. I pointed the gun at him and told him to behave. He stood up slowly, tall guy, about 6'3", thick arms, clearly strong, but looking pretty rough after our little exchange. He warned me not to get cocky, said the neighbors wouldn't appreciate too much noise. I figured he'd noticed something was different about me, which is why he'd hidden inside instead of coming out to bully me like usual. I didn't care about any of that. Where's your food? Tell me, and I'll spare you. He looked confused. I spelled it out. I was robbing him. I was hungry, and he shouldn't waste my time. His face darkened, but he pointed toward the kitchen. I walked in with the rifle over my shoulder and tore through his cupboards. They were packed with food, way more than mine. I ate until I was full. After eating, I finally had the clarity to take stock of myself. Fighting the old man, I could tell my body was way stronger than a normal person's. Stronger even than my old body in my previous life. That punch to his stomach? I'd held back. If I hadn't, he probably wouldn't have gotten up again. All my wounds from yesterday had healed almost completely, barely leaving a trace. Something was filling my blood vessels, strengthening my muscles. I didn't know when it started. I'd been too weak and distracted right after transmigrating to notice. I went back to the old man and thanked him for the meal. Told him not to feel too wronged. After all, he used to help himself to Dylan's things all the time. What goes around comes around. Then I took his hunting rifle and walked out. Leaving the old man's house, I felt someone watching me. I looked up at the house across the street. Second floor, dark windows, nothing visible. Dylan's memories had no information about whoever lived there. Behind me, the old man let out a raspy laugh and suggested I go rob that neighbor too, saying they were rich. I ignored him. I headed out of town to find the revolver I'd tossed in the forest last night. Staying alive was my top priority now. In my previous life, everyone I cared about had already passed away and I'd accomplished what I wanted, so I didn't feel too upset about being in a new world. When I reached the spot where I'd fought the two men, the revolver was easy to find. But the bodies were gone, just scattered bits of flesh and patches of hair with scalp attached. Something had torn them apart. A chill ran down my spine. I grabbed the revolver and was about to leave when I caught a smell that made me instinctively uncomfortable. I couldn't tell where it came from. I gripped the hunting rifle tight. I checked it earlier, 3 shots loaded. Then I heard faint footsteps on dry leaves, getting closer. My hearing had gotten incredibly sharp somehow, but I still couldn't pinpoint the direction. The steps matched my heartbeat. Sweat formed on my forehead. The sound stopped. That wasn't a good sign. Every hair on my body stood up. It was behind me. I rolled sideways, but no attack came. I looked back from a crouching position. It was a horse-sized black beast, shaped like a wolf, but far worse. One single eye in the middle of its forehead. Its head was oversized, and its mouth split all the way down to the neck, rows of fangs sticking out past the lips. Terrifying. It stared at me, drool hanging from its jaws in strings. I aimed the rifle but didn't shoot. It wasn't attacking yet, and I had no idea if bullets could even kill this thing. After a few seconds, it started creeping closer, teeth fully bared, growling low. That was enough. I fired. Blood burst from its forehead. The bullet didn't go through. I could see the metal lodged in the flesh above its eye. I chambered the second round and fired again. But the beast dodged with impossible speed. I tried for the third shot, but it was already on top of me. Massive jaws right in my face. I leaned back hard, twisted my body, and threw a spinning kick straight into its lower jaw. Years of combat instinct took over. The move came out clean despite this being a new body. It felt like kicking iron, but under my enhanced strength, the 800-kilo beast flipped backward through the air. I lost my balance and hit the ground, but sprang back up immediately. The beast hesitated. It knew I wasn't easy prey. But after pacing for a few seconds, it charged again. This time I couldn't dodge. It caught my ankle in its jaws and whipped its head. I went flying, slammed into the ground. Pain everywhere. My vision cleared just in time to see its open mouth coming down on me. Death had never felt closer. My heart was pounding out of my chest. Then something inside me erupted. That thing filling my blood vessels. It boiled over. My body changed on pure instinct. My right hand lashed out. I heard flesh tear. The beast screamed. A red haze covered my vision. My mind was flooded with the urge to kill, to destroy, to taste blood. I already wanted this thing dead, so I threw myself at it. We tore into each other. Our strength was equal, but I still had my fighting instincts, so I dominated easily. Within minutes, the beast was ripped open, flesh peeled back, bones showing, body destroyed. I pinned it to the ground with one hand. It whimpered, begging for mercy. I was about to finish it when a flash of clarity cut through the madness. My sanity returned. I stood there, feeling the violent rage still churning inside me. I looked down at the hand pinning the beast. Black hair, hard as steel needles, covered my entire arm. Sharp claws gleamed at the tips of my fingers. And at the bottom of my vision, a wolf's snout. I had become a werewolf, so I'm a werewolf now. It hit me quickly. Dylan wasn't one, but that bearded guy last night bit my wrist during our fight. His wolf toxin infected me. I couldn't help but laugh bitterly. From Dylan's memories, I knew that werewolves, vampires, and demons were all classified as evil creatures in this world. Every kingdom hunted them through organizations like night temples and mage alliances. Being a werewolf meant being a target. Nothing I could do about it now. One step at a time. Looking down at the beast I'd pinned, I realized something remarkable. I was fully rational in wolf form. Apparently, most werewolves lose their minds completely after transforming, becoming slaves to their killing instincts. Even the most talented ones could only hold on to a tiny bit of reason after heavy training. But my years of military service and missions had forged my willpower into something abnormal. The bloodlust was constant, clawing at my sanity, but I could handle it. The beast had completely submitted. I raised my claws to kill it, then hesitated. Not out of mercy, I was thinking practically. Some instinct, maybe a werewolf bloodline ability, told me I could control this creature. I could give it commands through a mental link. Why waste a potential tool? I let it live. Then curiosity got to me. I could feel the wolf toxin sitting in my blood vessels. When I transformed, it became active and spread further. I realized I could control it. even push it out of my body entirely if I wanted. I wondered what would happen if I filled every blood vessel with it. I tried. The toxins surged through me. My body grew. Taller, bigger, muscles swelling, fangs and claws radiating a dark energy that was almost solid. The beast at my feet buried its head in the ground, shaking with terror. My senses sharpened to an insane degree. I felt like I could track a mosquito from 100 meters away. My height hit 6 meters. Black energy surrounded my body. I threw a few punches and the wind pressure alone snapped trees. But I'd only filled half my blood vessels before hitting the limit of what my willpower could endure. And the energy drain was massive. Hunger was already creeping back. I shifted back to human form. Completely naked, of course. The transformation had destroyed my clothes. Great. I ordered the beast to go hunt something. It scrambled into the forest, terrified and eager to obey. Hours later it came back, dragging a wild boar. I built a fire and roasted it. I could eat raw meat now with this body, but I refused to live like an animal. While eating, I noticed something. Even back in human form, my body was now nearly as strong as when I'd first transformed. The full power experiment had permanently changed me somehow. Each transformation seemed to push my base strength higher. I also spotted a one-eyed rat nearby, gnawing on the leftover flesh from those two men. Its smell was similar to the beast's. That horse-sized monster was probably just a rat that had been infected with wolf toxin and mutated. After eating, I gave the beast one leg of the boar and sent it to fetch clothes from my house. The mental link let me send clear images of what I needed, which was convenient. I stored the remaining meat at home, got dressed, and headed out of town to spend my last bit of money on vegetables and bread. I was going to need a horse cart eventually. The nearest town to Bayek was called Dude, a proper, busy place with schools, a government hall, a police station, factories, and all kinds of facilities. Gothic buildings lined the streets, horse carriages rolled by, and people wore clothes that clearly showed their social class. Compared to Bayek, it felt like a completely different world. There seemed to be more people than usual today. From Dylan's memories, this kind of crowd usually meant a circus was in town or some festival was happening. I didn't care. I was here for food. I bought vegetables from a few stalls and was left with just 2 copper coins. I needed to figure out how to make money, and soon. On my way back, I caught a boy named Mayer who nearly tripped and fell. He thanked me politely. His group of 6 young people, 3 boys and 2 girls, were all excited about seeing some famous knight called Berlin. Apparently Berlin was a great knight who had once defeated a level 3 vampire. He was a big deal around here. Dylan's memories recognized the group. Not personally, but he'd noticed them before on trips to this town, mainly because 2 of the girls were very pretty. The old Dylan would have tried to pursue them back when his family was rich, but after losing everything, all he had left was shame. I didn't care about any knight. I tightened my grip on my groceries and kept walking. Meanwhile in town, Berlin arrived with his troops, silver armor, a red cape with gold trim, riding a white horse covered in silver plate. 2 soldiers at the front carried tall banners. The townspeople cheered, girls swooned. The mayor greeted him personally and showed him to prepared rooms. Berlin mentioned something important. He was here partly to track down 2 wanted werewolves. He told the mayor not to worry, saying they were just low-level werewolves with thin bloodlines. A few police officers with guns could handle them. 2 wanted werewolves. I'd killed 2 men in the forest last night. One of them was definitely a werewolf. A chill went through me, but I kept walking. As the road got more remote and people disappeared, I spotted a figure ahead. I slowed down and stayed cautious. After yesterday, anything could be a threat. As I got closer, I saw it was a man in dark gray clothes with a strange head wrap, dark skin, deep circles under his eyes, and a completely blank expression. He carried a bag of goods in one hand, a fellow shopper heading home. I caught a familiar scent on him, the smell of Bayek. He had to be a neighbor I hadn't met yet. At his feet, lying in the weeds, was another figure, a body I couldn't tell if dead or alive. "Sir, are you also a resident of Bayek?" I asked carefully. He glanced at me and nodded without a word. Not a talker. I looked down at the body on the ground and asked quietly, "Did you kill this person?" I had no idea what I'd walked into. I asked the man why he was just standing there. To my surprise, he actually answered. In a low, rough voice, he said he was trying to decide whether to save the woman on the ground. If he did, He'd have to walk all the way back to Dude to find a clinic. If he didn't, he'd feel bad about it. I offered a deal. I'd carry the woman to the clinic if he'd take my groceries back to my house. He agreed without hesitation. I introduced myself as Glenn Nabankru. Since I probably wouldn't be running into anyone who knew the original Dylan, I decided to use my own first name. It fit naturally in this world's language anyway. He shook my hand and said his name was Black Crow. Strange name, but I kept a straight face. I told him where my house was and where I hid the key. I wasn't worried about him stealing anything. There was nothing worth taking, and a man who wanted to save a stranger wasn't likely to be a thief. Besides, I'd memorized his scent. With my werewolf nose, I could track him anywhere. The injured woman was in her 50s, plainly dressed, clearly working class. She had blood at the corner of her mouth, heavy bruising on her arms from blunt hits, and a few shallow knife wounds. Painful, but not fatal. I did what I could for her injuries, lifted her onto my back, and headed to Dude. Carrying someone who weighed about 50 kilos over a couple of kilometers was nothing for my current body. After asking around, I found a private clinic and brought her in. The doctor asked if I was family. I said no, I'd found her on the road. He asked if I'd pay for treatment. I told him I had no money. She could handle it when she woke up. I waited. Before long, they told me she was awake. I was about to leave when a familiar figure burst through the clinic door. It was Layla, one of those pretty girls from the group of young people I'd seen earlier. She grabbed my hand, crying and out of breath, and asked if I was the one who'd brought in an injured woman. I nodded, confused about why she was here. She rushed past me into the room. When she saw the woman on the bed, she threw herself down and sobbed. "Mom." The mother held her tight, crying too. The doctors and nurses watched with teary eyes, calling it a touching scene. I stood off to the side thinking about something else entirely. She really was a very pretty girl. No wonder Dylan had memorized her name. After calming down, Layla came back to me. With red, swollen eyes, she bowed and thanked me deeply. She begged me to give her my address so she could come thank me properly. My house. In Bayek? She'd be terrified, but she clearly wasn't going to take no for an answer. So I told her, Bayek town, go straight from the main entrance, find the house squeezed between a villa and a 3-story building. I'd have my beast guard her secretly when she came. That should keep her safe. She smiled brightly and called me an incredibly kind gentleman. I almost laughed. She had no idea what she was getting into. The doctors and nurses looked puzzled when they heard Bayek. None of them seemed to know the place. I wasn't surprised. I just said it was remote and left. The two towns were close enough. If Layla asked around, she'd find it. When I got home, I could tell from the scent that Black Crow had been there. He'd left my groceries just inside the door without even stepping in. Simple and efficient, I respected that. I needed to figure out how to preserve the boar meat from earlier. No fridges in this world, so I'd go with smoking it the old way. Apparently, ice magic existed here, something to look into later. I slept until 11 the next morning. When I opened the window, I saw the old man next door coming back from outside, carrying a Rottweiler puppy. This guy really loved dogs. I leaned out and shouted down cheerfully, "Hey neighbor, nice dog. Where'd you get it?" He jumped at the sudden noise in the dead quiet town, glared up at me, then recognized who it was. His face went stiff. He just snorted and walked away. I laughed and went inside to wash up. Then I remembered Layla might visit, so I leaned out the window and whistled. My beast came charging out of the fog and crouched below, eyes focused, waiting for orders like a soldier. I told it to hide in the forest outside town and secretly protect any girl who came this way. It straightened up like it was saluting, then bolted off. I started working on the house. The fireplace needed modifying for smoking meat. It was sealed, so I had to break open a section. While smashing at the bricks, my sharp ears caught something odd below. A hollow sound. I tapped around the floor carefully and confirmed it. There was empty space underneath. The previous owner never mentioned any basement. After searching the house, I found a trapdoor hidden under a big wooden cabinet in the storage room. It was wrapped in rusty chains. Whoever sealed it really didn't want anyone going down there. I used a bit of werewolf strength and snapped the chains easily. Wooden stairs led down into darkness. A rotten smell drifted up, but I wasn't about to back off now. I grabbed an oil lantern, lit it, and went down. Rats scattered into the shadows by the dozens. The basement had a few old bookshelves with books chewed to pieces and a rotting round table covered in junk. broken glass bottles, spilled liquids, scattered papers and containers. I picked up one of the less destroyed books and tried to read it. Something about Holmagen's second substitution and magic seals. I slammed it shut. Couldn't understand a word of it. The rest of the basement was disappointing, nothing valuable. But then I noticed one more door. It was made of dark brown wood with old-fashioned patterns carved into it. The door frame was covered in runes. Above it sat something like a clock face, but with only one needle and 5 sections marked with strange symbols. The needle pointed to the top section. I took a deep breath and turned the handle. The door clicked and slowly opened. What I didn't notice was that the symbol the needle pointed to gave off a faint glow the instant I opened it. I pushed the door open expecting a dark room. Instead, blinding light hit my eyes. When my vision adjusted, I was standing in a jungle, surrounded by ugly humanoid monsters staring right at me. Hello, I managed. Food. One of them slurred, and they all dropped what they were eating, grabbed stone clubs and axes, and charged. I flexed my fingers and let the claws out, just my arms, no full transformation, so my clothes stayed intact. A few seconds later, several ogres lay dead, and the rest were running away with serious injuries. I could have killed them all, but didn't feel like dealing with the smell. I looked around, completely confused. My basement door had somehow opened into this place. The door behind me was part of a stone structure, stone on the outside, wood on the inside. I also noticed a ring of runes had appeared on my right wrist, the hand I'd used to turn the handle. Some kind of mark. Then the door shut on its own. My stomach dropped. I clawed at the seams. Nothing. For a moment I thought I was trapped. But I forced myself to calm down, studied the rune on my wrist, and started feeling around the stone surface. When I touched a triangular pattern, the rune glowed and the door opened again. Now that I knew how to get back, I decided to explore. I climbed a nearby mountain and spotted a full city in the distance. European-style buildings, a castle, factories with black smoke. This looked like a regional capital. I partially transformed for speed and tore through the forest. Near the city walls, I saw busy roads filled with merchant caravans, pedestrians, and strange riding creatures. Car-sized lizard beasts, big cats with 2 horns. Soldiers in armor with firearms guarded the open gates. I shifted back to normal, walked out casually, and asked a passing young man where I was. "This is Caladria," he said, looking at me like I was crazy. "How do you not know that, Caladria?" That was on the western side of the kingdom, several districts away from Bayek. It was the closest major city to the royal capital. That door in my basement was a teleportation gate. Whoever built it must have been a serious mage. Judging by how abandoned and dusty that basement was, that mage was probably long dead. I didn't go into the city, no money, no reason to. I slipped back into the forest and returned through the door. Meanwhile, at the city gate, an eagle perched on a police officer's shoulder spoke in a human voice, saying it thought it detected a werewolf scent. The officer dismissed it, saying knights had already swept the area clean. Back near Dude, Layla dressed up in her best outfit, packed a basket of gifts her mother had carefully prepared, and set out to visit me. She tried to get her friends to come along, but they all had excuses. One girl named Bonnie, the only one available, turned pale when she heard the destination. Bonnie told Layla she'd once stumbled into Bayek by accident. She said monsters lurked in the fog there, and she barely escaped alive. She begged Layla not to go. Layla just laughed and hugged her. In Layla's mind, if Bayek were really that dangerous, it wouldn't be so unknown, and besides, a kind gentleman lived there. She left on her own. Bonnie chased after Layla, too worried to let her go alone. They walked together, chatting about school, exams, elven language, math, herbal analysis. Since no carriages went to Bayek, they had to walk the whole way. As the road grew more remote, the eerie silence of Bayek crept in. Their laughter faded to whispers. Even Layla, who'd been so confident, started feeling uneasy. The houses they passed looked abandoned, but the sensation of being watched from dark windows was unmistakable. Layla was starting to believe Bonnie's warnings, but she'd come this far. She wasn't turning back. Behind them in the trees, my beast was watching, confused. I told it to protect one girl, not 2. It didn't know which one was the right one. I'd just gotten back from exploring the basement portal and was starving, so I was cooking lunch and humming songs to myself while I worked. The old man next door heard me through the wall, and grumbled about what an annoying kid I was, then turned back to his new puppy and told it to stay away from me. Just as I set the hot dishes on the table and sat down to eat, someone knocked on the door. I opened it a crack and saw Layla standing there with a smaller girl I didn't recognize. Layla's face lit up when she saw me. She curtsied politely and introduced herself formally, along with her friend Bonnie. I was genuinely surprised she'd actually made it. I figured the creepy atmosphere would scare her off long before she reached my door. This girl was braver than I'd expected. I invited them inside. They slipped past me nervously. Bonnie was timid, sticking close to Layla. The fact that she'd come along to a place like this just for her friend told me they were close. Layla noticed the steaming food on the table and apologized for interrupting my meal. I waved it off and invited them both to eat with me. Layla immediately tried to refuse. Where they came from, food was scarce for common families. Accepting a meal from someone was considered rude because it meant using up their supplies. But I insisted. I told them in my homeland, sharing food with guests was the most basic courtesy, and refusing would actually disappoint me. Bonnie's eyes were already sparkling at the sight of the dishes. When Layla finally agreed, Bonnie looked relieved. Layla seemed touched. She could see my house was even poorer looking than hers, yet I still insisted on this custom. I could tell her respect for me went up a notch. I set out chairs and handed them each a pair of utensils. Both girls stared at what I'd given them with complete confusion. "Mr. Glenn, what are these?" Layla asked carefully, holding up 2 wooden chopsticks. I sat down and showed them how to use chopsticks, picking up a piece of stir-fried meat as a demonstration. They watched with wide, curious eyes, then tried it themselves. I expected them to struggle, but both girls figured it out surprisingly fast. I'd already prepared forks and spoons as backup, but they didn't need them. When Layla tasted the first bite, she closed her eyes in quiet enjoyment. Bonnie was less reserved. She gushed openly about how amazing it was. Their reactions made me ridiculously proud, though I tried to keep a straight face. Over the meal, I asked about their lives. They were students at Mace Academy, on a day off. I casually asked if their school taught magic. They both looked at me strangely. Layla explained that magic was only taught at magic towers by specialized tutors. Their school only covered basic general knowledge about it. I felt a bit embarrassed, but Dylan had barely gone to school. He was a rich kid who spent money instead of learning, so huge gaps in common knowledge came with the territory. The conversation loosened up as we ate. The girls relaxed, showing their naturally lively personalities, and I cracked a few jokes that got them laughing. Bonnie said she'd do anything to eat food like this every day. Layla teased her about eating someone into poverty. I told Bonnie she was welcome anytime, if she had the courage to come back. She remembered the creepy atmosphere outside and shrank into her shoulders. We all laughed. After the meal, Layla apologized that her gifts, fruit, vegetables, and bread in the basket, didn't match the value of the lunch. Meat was expensive in this world, so she felt outmatched. I told her sincerity mattered more than the price of any gift. That seemed to hit both girls deeply. Something ordinary where I came from apparently carried real weight here. I could tell they were ready to leave, so I walked them out and told them to hurry home before dark. After they left, I gave my beast orders to follow and protect them both. Then I turned my attention to my plan for making money. On the road back, Layla told Bonnie that I seemed like an interesting person worth visiting again. Bonnie agreed, but insisted they should bring more friends next time for safety. Layla suggested asking Bonnie to come along again. Bonnie rolled her eyes and said they needed a strong boy, not 2 helpless girls. Layla considered their friend Poke, but laughed. His courage was even smaller than Bonnie's, despite his constant talk about becoming a knight. Then a familiar voice interrupted them. "Thank heavens, Layla. I've been waiting here for you." A short man with a dark brown beard stepped out from ahead, flanked by 2 large, rough-looking men. Layla froze. "Dad." It was Bob, Layla's father, the man who had beaten her mother nearly to death. He smiled warmly and told her he'd been worried, that this area was dangerous, and that she should come with him. Layla refused. She told him he'd almost killed her mother. Bob made excuses. He'd been drunk. Her mother should have just given him the money. Before the argument could go further, one of the big men lost patience. He said they didn't have time for family drama and grabbed both girls. They were yanked to the ground and dragged back along the road, screaming and struggling. Bob weakly asked the men to be a little gentler since Layla was his daughter. One of them laughed. "Daughter? She stopped being your daughter the moment you sold her to the boss. The thug's words shut Bob up completely. He just stood there watching his own daughter get dragged away, even as she looked at him begging for help. But my beast was watching. It let out a deep, threatening growl from the foggy tree line. Everyone froze. The two thugs turned around and saw its massive shape in the shadows, that glowing single eye staring them down with pure malice. They let go of the girls instantly. Bob screamed something about God, what himself, and ran. The thugs followed right behind, abandoning their mission completely. Layla and Bonnie clung to each other, too scared to look around. After a few seconds, Layla gathered her courage and checked. The men were gone, and whatever had scared them had vanished too. She helped Bonnie up, brushed off their clothes, and they hurried back toward Dude. I was at home packing tools when I heard something outside. I opened the door and found my beast sitting there, drooling, staring at me with that single eye. It made a series of whimpering sounds, strange but oddly expressive. Nobody else would have understood, but through our link I got the message clearly. 3 men had tried to grab the girls, and it had scared them off. I narrowed my eyes. People don't just wander near Bayek by accident. Those men had specifically targeted Layla or Bonnie. But the girls were safe, so I let it go for now. I told the beast it did a good job. It went absolutely crazy with excitement, bouncing around my front yard like a giant puppy. I had to stop it before it wrecked the place. Not exactly what I expected from a terrifying one-eyed monster. The commotion drew some attention from the neighbors. I felt several gazes land on us from nearby houses. I glanced at one of them briefly, then sent the beast to wait outside town. I had work to do. What I didn't know was that one of those watching houses had very unusual residents. Behind a curtain on the 2nd floor, a puppet in a blue vest, named Polindus, was complaining to his sister Aina that the new neighbor was too noisy. Aina was a far more lifelike puppet, beautiful like a storybook princess, clearly made with much more care. She told her brother to stop being so uptight. They'd been hiding in that house for years, waiting for their creator to return, and she was sick of it. She argued they should at least go outside and ask around for news of their master. After some back and forth, Polindus gave in. They could explore nearby, but nothing more. Aina kissed his wooden cheek in celebration. Meanwhile, I climbed onto my beast and rode it deep into the forest. I'd noticed plenty of animal tracks and droppings around Bayek since I first arrived. My plan was simple: hunt game, haul it to Dude, and sell it. That was going to be my income for now. Having a super-sensitive nose isn't always a blessing. Standing in a swamp filled with rotting carcasses and animal dung, I wanted to rip my nostrils off. All for the money, I told myself, grabbed a shovel, and started digging a pit trap. I could have just transformed and caught the pigs myself, but I had no spare clothes left. So the old-fashioned way. I dug a 3-square-meter hole, camouflaged it, and hid in some bushes, smearing mud on myself to mask my scent. Through our link, I'd already sent the beast out to round up wild boars and drive them toward me. Then I heard rumbling footsteps, way too heavy for pigs. My beast came crashing into view first, looking panicked, yelping at me. Right behind it charged a 5-meter-tall, gray-skinned giant, completely naked, carrying 3 black wild boars tied with rope in one hand. "You can't run. You're mine," it bellowed stupidly. I jumped up and shouted for my beast to leap over the hidden pit. It did, clearing it perfectly. The giant didn't think twice. It stepped right onto the trap and crashed in with a yelp. "Stupid hole. Abu hates you," it screamed, thrashing around. My beast explained what happened through our link. It had been herding pigs as planned when this idiot showed up, scattered the herd, stole 3, and chased my beast all the way here. I was annoyed. I walked to the edge and demanded my pigs back. The giant saw me and got excited, calling me a snack. I told it to come get me then. It raged and struggled, but couldn't climb out, just wasted energy while sinking deeper into the swamp mud. When it finally calmed down, I offered a deal. "Give me the pigs, and I'll dig you out." Abu refused, clutching the pigs like a toddler with toys, insisting everything in this forest belonged to it because it was the king. I argued back and forth with this oversized child until my patience ran out. I told it to hand over the pigs or get buried alive. Then my beast and I started shoveling mud into the pit. Abu panicked as the muck reached its chest. The tough talk turned to pleading. After much internal struggle, it finally agreed. It flung the 3 unconscious pigs up to me. They were alive, just passed out from fright. I kept my word. I had the beast dig out key spots around the trap to drain the swamp mud. Once Abu could grab the edge, it pulled itself out. I'm someone who honors his promises as long as there's no compelling reason not to. Hope we don't have another unpleasant meeting, I said, ready to leave. Abu sat at the pit's edge and looked at me. I thought I caught something strange in its eyes, a mocking glint. Before I could think about what that meant, a sudden loud noise erupted through the quiet forest, making me, my beast, and even Abu flinch. The 3 black pigs exploded. Their guts burst open, spraying foul blood everywhere. All over me. All over my beast. Abu's ugly laughter rang out. Stupid human. Even if I ruin them, I won't let you have them. I stood there frozen for a few seconds, blood dripping from my face. Then I wiped it off slowly and turned to look at the giant with completely dead eyes. What are you going to do about it? Abu taunted, standing up to its full height. I'm going to kill you. I launched off the ground so fast the mud exploded beneath my feet. Black hair sprouted across my skin. Claws and fangs extended. Partial transformation, maximum power without destroying my clothes. I went straight for the eyes. Abu didn't even have time to react before I gouged them out. Blinded, it swung its fists wildly while I carved into its arms, chest, stomach, and back. Its belly had the softest skin, though even that was almost as hard as rock. I focused my attacks there. The giant screamed, begged, apologized. None of it mattered. It fell back into the same pit that had trapped it before, and this time it wasn't getting out. I flicked the warm blood off my hands and walked away. The pigs were ruined. Some kind of curse had made them reek and rot. Completely inedible. I sighed and told my beast we were done for the day. Near my house, I found Black Crow standing outside my front gate, holding a full bag of groceries. He'd been waiting for me. He said he was just passing by and wanted to say hello. I found that oddly charming. He mentioned his wife had a big appetite lately, so he'd made a second trip to Dude for more supplies. I was surprised he was married and asked him to pass along my greetings. Then he noticed all the blood on me and asked if I'd been in danger. I laughed it off, just a small accident. He told me I could come to him if I ever needed help. Then he left quietly. I wanted to ask him for a spare shirt, but one look at his strange outfit made me reconsider. As I was about to go inside, still wondering what to wear, I caught the old man next door peeking through his window. My eyes lit up. Problem solved. I walked right into his house. He protested weakly, asking me to at least leave him some food this time. I told him to relax. I just needed to borrow some clothes. He was actually relieved. A clothing request was much better than what he'd feared. He told me to wait and went upstairs. With my sharp hearing, I caught him whispering to his puppy up there. Stay quiet, baby. The guy downstairs is dangerous. I'll feed you after he leaves. The thought that I'd bully a puppy was so absurd it nearly made me laugh out loud. Meanwhile, Layla and Bonnie made it back to Dude after dark, terrified they'd run into Bob and his thugs again. Bonnie urged Layla to report her father to the police. Layla hesitated. He was still her father, but she decided to do it. He'd tormented them for too long. Any family bond was already gone. Bonnie worried about retaliation if the men weren't caught. Layla reassured her. The night Berlin was still in town, and tomorrow they'd be back at school where it was safer. She held her trembling friend close, even though she was just as scared inside. The old man came downstairs with a set of brown clothes, his smallest size. I thanked him, took them, and left. Back home, I heated water, filled the tub, and soaked. It felt amazing after the day I'd had. The clothes were a bit big, but good enough. I sat in the living room by the oil lamp, thinking over everything. No phone, no entertainment, nothing to do at night. I went to bed early. Sometime during the night, a noise woke me. I crept to the window and peered through the gap. My night vision was sharp enough to see everything clearly. Down in my yard, a pale, extremely long and thin creature, almost snake-like with limbs, was quietly rummaging around. Some kind of strange being I'd never seen before. But Dylan had lived here for a while without being attacked, so whatever this thing was, it probably wasn't interested in hurting residents. I decided to ignore it and went back to sleep. Nothing happened. I slept peacefully until morning. Today's hunt went much better. No giants, no surprises. My beast, and I caught 11 black pigs and 1 elk-like creature. A real haul. I killed 1 pig, built a crude wooden cart, and dragged it out of the forest toward Dude to sell. The rest stayed in the pit under my beast's watch. Pulling a cart by hand felt embarrassing, but I couldn't exactly ride a terrifying one-eyed monster into town. What I didn't know was what was happening behind the scenes with Layla's situation. Bob and his two thugs had spent the night hiding in a cave after being scared off by my beast. They crept back to Dude the next morning and made their way through back alleys to a rowdy bar in a dark corner of town, the kind of place the police ignored. They went inside to report to their boss, a man named Glass. When they were brought before him, he stood by a fireplace, a massive, powerful figure. When he turned around, his face was terrifying. Red eyes, fangs jutting past his lips, features like an orc from a fantasy game. He wasn't human, though I didn't know what he was. Glass listened to their excuse about a monster scaring them off and dismissed it coldly. He said they'd ruined everything. His men dragged the three of them out. The punishment for failure was losing a finger. If he wasn't short on people, it would have been far worse. After they were taken away, Glass spoke to the empty room, asking how much more life energy was needed. A raspy voice answered from nowhere, telling him to find more young lives to sacrifice. Once this thing fully awakened, it promised to elevate Glass to the highest position of power. Something dark was brewing in Dude, and Layla was caught right in the middle of it. I dragged my cart with the black pig all the way to Dude's Central Street. The town's butcher, a guy named him, had his stall set up. He was the only meat seller around, which made him arrogant. He treated customers like garbage, yelling at them, rushing them, knowing they had no other choice. When I approached and told him I was there to sell, not buy, he looked surprised. He inspected my black pig carefully, then offered me 30 copper coins. 30. He charged 42 coppers for a single chicken, and he wanted to give me 30 for an entire pig. I asked why. He said that was the price, take it or leave it, and nobody else in town would buy from me either. He had a monopoly, and he knew it. Have you ever been punched? I asked. He laughed and said the police would protect him. So I jabbed my finger straight through the 10-centimeter thick wooden board on his stall. The friction was so intense it actually smoked around the hole. His eyes nearly popped out of his skull. I told him he'd better hope he never ran into me outside of town, then grabbed my cart and walked away. He muttered something under his breath about just never leaving town. I heard it perfectly fine, but let it go. Making a scene wouldn't help. I needed to actually sell this pig. Before I got far, I noticed him dealing with an old woman. She was hunched over, hands shaking, counting out her last few copper coins. She asked for 2 bella of chicken, about 2 gene. Snatched her money, announced it was only enough for 1 bella, and shoved a tiny portion into her bag. She begged for more, saying her grandchildren were growing and needed the food. He didn't care. I couldn't watch this. I put my cart down and walked back. Saw me coming and immediately ducked his head, terrified. I spoke gently to the old woman. Ma'am, do you need meat? I'm also a seller. I can offer you a much better price. She looked up at me with tired, worried eyes. But I don't have any copper coins left. I slapped my hand on him's wooden counter and asked him how much the old woman had paid. He stammered out 21 copper coins for just 1 bella of chicken. I mocked him for being such a generous seller. Then, before he could react, I reached into his coin pouch, pulled out exactly 21 coppers, and placed them carefully in the old woman's hands. I gave the chicken back to him. Come with me, I told her. I'll sell you something better and cheaper. She followed, confused. I led her to my black pig and then did something I hadn't planned. I started performing. I called out to everyone on the street. Ladies and gentlemen, come see something worth your time. People stopped, shoppers, carriage riders, passers-by, and gathered around. Once I had a crowd, I announced my price, for copper coins per bella of pork. That got their attention. I'm charged over 40 for chicken. People murmured, curious but skeptical about black pig meat. Then I told them I'd show them a special skill, plucking a pig barehanded. I grew a thin, invisible layer of hair over my palms for protection and went to work. My hands moved so fast people gasped. The sound of bristles ripping free was constant, and within minutes the black pig went from hairy to perfectly smooth and clean. I bowed. The crowd erupted in cheers and applause. Even the old woman was clapping with a big smile on her wrinkled face. I served her first. 21 coppers bought her 5 bella, and since she was my first customer, I threw in an extra 1, 6 bella total. She could barely hold it all, so I turned her cloth bag into a makeshift backpack and helped her strap it on. She thanked me warmly, and said she'd never been treated this well by any seller. After that, the floodgates opened. Women rushed forward shouting their orders. 4 Bella, 5 Bella, 2 Bella. I handled them all with a smile, slicing and weighing with my dagger and a borrowed scale. Over at his stall, washed with bloodshot eyes, furiously chopping his chicken into smaller and smaller pieces, muttering to himself that people would come crawling back once they tasted the pork. Meanwhile, at the Dude police station, things were getting serious. A young officer brought in another missing child report, an 11-year-old, gone for 3 days. The captain, a man with a thick mustache, rubbed his forehead. 2 girls had already filed a report yesterday. That was Layla and Bonnie reporting Bob. Now more children were disappearing. They'd spotted Bob in town, but couldn't find where he was hiding. The captain told them to keep searching. Then one of his officers brought up my name. He said they needed to visit a young man called Glenn. It sounded urgent. The captain agreed reluctantly, saying the situation demanded it. Before they could leave, another officer burst in to report that I'd just arrived in town. The captain stood up. Let's go. By the time the black pig was sold out, it was nearly dusk. I'd made 2,400 copper coins. My pockets were visibly stuffed. Finally, I wasn't broke anymore. I planned to buy ingredients for hot pot and check on Layla and Bonnie. What happened to them yesterday was partly connected to me. Before I could leave, a group of people in plain clothes walked toward me. I'd noticed them watching me the whole time I was selling. I recognized the type instantly, police. I'd dealt with plenty of them in my past life. Their captain, a man with a thick straight mustache, got right to the point. He asked if I was Glenn. I played slightly nervous and asked if I'd done something wrong. Of course I knew why they were here. Layla and Bonnie had filed a report about Bob. The questioning lasted about 15 minutes. Basic stuff. My name, why I'd changed it from Dylan to Glenn, whether the girls had been at my house yesterday, whether I knew Bob. Standard procedure. At the end, the captain gave me a strange look and asked if I really lived in Bayek. When I confirmed, he leaned in close and whispered that when he first became captain, his superiors told him to never go near that place unless absolutely necessary. He said I'd probably been tricked into buying a house there and should move away as soon as possible. That made me even more curious. The government clearly knew about Bayek but chose to leave it alone, despite whatever was lurking there. Why? I set the question aside and went shopping. After buying what I needed, I followed Layla and Bonnie's scent trail to make sure they were safe. It led me to Mace Academy, a school behind tall iron gates with black bars and spiral decorations. Through the gate, I could see yellowish tower-shaped buildings and hear lectures in progress. The girls were inside, safe. I noticed the stone crow carvings on the gate pillars seemed to be watching me. For a supposedly ordinary school, that felt a little unusual. Maybe even normal schools had some magical elements that regular students didn't know about. I wasn't going to barge in and risk being mistaken for a creep, so I turned to leave. But then my ears picked up something odd, sounds coming from not far away, along the wall. Something was happening. I pressed close to the wall and headed toward the noise. Meanwhile, I learned some important things from overhearing the police. The captain had analyzed the situation for his officers. Children had been disappearing outside of town for 5 days, and the criminals were afraid to act inside town because of Berlin's presence. The mayor had refused to let the police bring the case to Berlin, saying the night had more important business and wouldn't stay long. The captain was frustrated but determined. He told his men to keep patrolling and find the criminals themselves. And in the background, the dark figure named Glass and whatever voice was guiding him were simply waiting for Berlin to leave before making their next move. They needed young lives for some kind of sacrifice. The danger was far from over. I followed the sounds along the academy wall and found a group of thugs in servant uniforms gathered under some trees, laughing and having a great time. A curly-haired boy in expensive clothes was ordering them around. On the ground, a skinny old man and a messy-haired girl were being beaten. The old man was fighting back desperately, cursing in broken speech. He clearly had trouble speaking clearly. The girl just cried with her face hidden behind her hair. When the thugs started tying her up with rope, the old man went wild and headbutted one of them in the stomach. I'd seen enough. What do you think you're doing? I shouted from a tree branch above them. Everyone froze. The curly-haired kid recovered first and started screaming insults, calling me a filthy beggar, a lowlife, telling me to get lost. He didn't slow down even after seeing I was bigger and older than him. I jumped down and looked at him coldly. He kept going, asking if I knew who his father was. I slapped him so hard he spun around 1.5 times before hitting the ground. The silence that followed was beautiful. Nobody could process what had just happened. A commoner striking a noble. The kid got up shaking, saw blood on his hand from his split lip, and burst into tears. He screamed at his men to kill me. They charged, suddenly desperate. If they went back with their young master beaten up like this, they'd be punished badly. But desperate didn't mean skilled. Within minutes, every single one was on the ground howling in pain. The curly-haired brat cried that he'd tell his mommy and daddy, then ran away surprisingly fast for someone who'd just been slapped into next week. "Remember the name?" I called after him. "Glenn Nabankru. I live in Bayek." He turned back with a swollen, tear-streaked face and glared at me with pure hatred. "Good. Let him come." The old man on the ground struggled up and tried to help his daughter stand. He called out to me urgently, stammering through his words. I'd offended a noble, and they'd come for revenge. He begged me to flee the town, as far as possible. I smiled and asked if the girl was his daughter. He nodded and said her name was Masha. I told him he was a good father. He got more anxious, insisting I needed to run. I waved it off. "It's just one noble family. I can handle it. Don't worry about me." He seemed stunned, but somehow believed me. I asked why they'd been attacked. He gave a bitter smile and said nobles didn't need reasons to beat commoners. He'd just been dropping his daughter off at school and appeared in their line of sight at the wrong moment. Typical nobles. Exactly what I expected. I asked the girl if she knew Layla. She wiped her tears and said everyone knew Layla. She was famous at school, the girl many boys dreamed about. But Layla didn't know her. The girl offered to go fetch Layla for me, but I declined. I just wanted to make sure she was okay. "Watch out for that curly-haired poodle," I told them, then jumped over the wall and disappeared. Behind me, I heard the old man mumble in confusion, and the girl burst out laughing through her tears. At the academy's front gate, the curly-haired kid, Ravel, was grabbing a uniformed staff member by the collar, screaming for a carriage to take him home. The man stammered that school rules didn't allow him to leave at this hour. Ravel just screamed louder, spit flying, threatening his father's wrath. Just as the curly-haired brat was storming off from the school gate, he turned a corner and ran straight into me. He shrieked like a pig. "Want me to give you a ride home?" I offered with a smile. He started cursing again, but I said it seemed like I hadn't hit him hard enough. He shut up instantly, glared at me, and ran off, keeping as much distance as possible. A staff member inside the gate told me outsiders weren't allowed near the school. I said I understood and walked away at my own pace. I spent some of my earnings at a clothing store, bought several sets of proper fitting clothes, plus tools like hammers and rivets. I loaded everything onto my cart and headed home. By the time I reached Bayek, it was late and dark. I saw a few fast shadows dart into corners as I entered the town. I glanced over but didn't bother investigating. After unloading at home, I grabbed my oil lantern and walked out to the forest to check on the animals I'd caught that morning. I didn't really need the lamp. My night vision was sharp, but the warm light felt comforting. My beast heard me coming and perked up excitedly. I pushed its big furry head away and asked if anything had happened while I was gone. Nothing had. Good. I checked the pit. All the black pigs and the elk creature were sleeping peacefully. "Keep watching them," I told the beast. "If anything you can't handle shows up, come find me immediately." It lifted its head proudly to show it understood. I patted its neck and headed home. What I didn't know was the chaos unfolding at a nearby estate. The curly-haired kid, Ravel, belonged to a noble family called Decarella. He cried the entire way home from school. When his mother, Lady Sophia, saw his swollen, bloody face, she nearly lost her mind. She swore on the family honor that the commoner who did this would hang. When Ravel's father, Lord Channies, arrived home and saw the damage, he was furious too. He immediately called for his personal knight, Barbel, and ordered him to go arrest me. But then Ravel said where I lived. "Bayek," he said. Channies froze mid-sentence. He called Barbel back. His wife demanded to know why he was hesitating over a mere commoner. His response was sharp. "Shut up," he snapped at her. The name Bayek had clearly changed something. Whatever that town's reputation was among the people who actually knew about it, it was enough to make even an angry nobleman think twice. Channies' shouts silenced everyone. Even Ravel stopped crying. After thinking hard for a while, he asked for my full name. Ravel told him, Glenn Nabankru. Channies repeated it to himself with his eyes closed, like he was searching his memory. When he opened them, he looked slightly relieved, but still worried. He mumbled something about needing to write a letter and walked off to his study, leaving his wife and son confused. Lady Sophia wasn't giving up. She sent the family knight, Barbel, to investigate Bayek. She told Ravel to be patient. Revenge would come. Later that night, Channies came out with a sealed letter and ordered a servant to deliver it to the main city's East District immediately. When Sophia asked what was going on, he pulled her into a private room and told her the truth. Bayek was home to monsters and dangerous beings. He'd learned this from a well-connected friend. Only high-ranking nobles knew about it. His friend had told him the residents of Bayek were so terrifying that even a dragon causing trouble there would end up dead. Sophia was horrified that such a place existed near their estate. But Channy said I probably wasn't one of the dangerous ones. His friend had listed the threats to watch out for in Bayek, and no, Glenn was on that list. Some weaker residents occasionally sold their houses, and ordinary people foolish enough to buy them moved in. He figured I was one of those idiots. He'd written to his friend for confirmation before making any moves. Meanwhile, I had no idea about any of this. I was just focused on building my life. My second day selling pork went well, though not as explosive as the first. There were only so many families in Dude who could afford meat. Still, I sold everything. And the butcher watched from his stall with bloodshot eyes. Even after dropping his prices to match mine, nobody came to him. My friendly attitude and the quality of the meat had won people over. With the money from 2 pigs, I was doing well enough to take a break from selling. I spent several days fixing up my house, repainted the walls, replaced the furniture. I also built a simple pig pen in the forest outside Bayek, since it was unclaimed land anyway. Everything was surprisingly smooth. Almost too smooth. Nearly a week had passed, and the curly-haired noble still hadn't come after me. I wondered what was taking so long. Each morning I chopped up wild grass for pig feed and tended to my small herd. I was thinking long-term now. Maybe I could save enough to study at a mage tower. But I'd heard that becoming a mage apprentice was extremely expensive, something only wealthy merchants and nobles could afford. Selling pork alone wouldn't cut it. I also wondered whether being a werewolf would affect my ability to learn magic. On my way to Dude with another pig, I passed those 2 puppets again, the ones I'd been seeing around Bayek all week. One was a crude, round-headed thing in a blue vest, barely more than a stick figure. The other was an incredibly lifelike female puppet in a pink dress with a parasol, so realistic you'd mistake her for human unless you looked closely. We'd never spoken. That was just how things worked in Bayek. Residents didn't bother each other unless they knew each other well. We exchanged glances as we passed, and kept moving. Behind me, the girl puppet, Aina, asked her brother Polindus where I was taking the dead pig. He said I was obviously a butcher going to sell meat. She wanted to follow me and see where I went, but Polindus firmly refused. They couldn't risk being seen by more people. Aina looked back at me one more time, then gave in. Approaching Dude, I noticed large groups of police patrolling outside the town. Unusual and clearly related to something serious. They stopped me at the entrance and inspected my dead pig thoroughly, even cutting into the skin to check for anything hidden inside. I stood there patiently and let them work. When they found nothing, they waved me through. As I straightened the pig on my cart with one hand, a few of them stared with wide eyes at my strength. Business was slower this time, which I expected. I couldn't drain the whole town spending money every visit. Still, the income was far better than what most common families earned. I chatted and joked with returning customers, keeping the atmosphere friendly. Then I heard a familiar voice call my name. Layla came running up, holding her skirt, face bright with surprise. She was out with friends on a day off from school. She seemed impressed that I was selling meat, calling it a solid business. Her group of friends caught up, Poke, the chubby redhead, Mayor, Diamela, and a blonde girl named Pernis. The 3 boys greeted me politely. Pernis, however, kept her distance, covering her nose and mouth, refusing to look at me or speak. Layla noticed and pulled Pernis aside, telling her she was being rude and should apologize. But Pernis whispered back, loud enough for my ears to catch every word, that Layla shouldn't associate with someone so dirty and foul-smelling, and they should leave immediately. Layla was shocked and furious. Pernis was a noble, but she'd always been kind to their group. This was a side Layla hadn't seen before. Before Layla could explode, I interrupted by asking where Bonnie was. Layla swallowed her anger, glared at Pernis, and came back to my stall. She tried to bow and apologize on Pernis' behalf. I stopped her. Your mother raised you too well. You're always so formal. I'm not going to get upset with a girl over something like this. Layla blushed, embarrassed. I noticed Pernis flinch when I called her a little girl. She almost turned around to snap at me, but held it in. I smiled to myself. I asked about Bonnie. Layla's expression fell. She said Bonnie wasn't doing well. She didn't want to come out. I guessed it was because of what happened with her father's thugs. Layla was surprised I knew, and I reminded her the police had already questioned me about it. So tell me, I said while serving another customer, Bonnie's been traumatized by what happened that day, hasn't she? She still hasn't recovered? Layla's eyes went wide. How did you know that's exactly it? I told Layla I was just guessing about Bonnie, but she'd already started talking. She said Bonnie had gone completely quiet since the incident, staring at nothing, barely speaking. Their friends had tried cheering her up with no luck. Bonnie's mother kept visiting the school in tears. Layla blamed herself for bringing Bonnie along that day. Her eyes went red, and she was about to cry. I quickly told her it wasn't her fault and nudged the 3 boys behind her to back me up. They caught on after a few seconds and agreed loudly. Then I almost said, blame the person who caused it, and realized that person was me. I'd been the one who told Layla to visit Bayek in the first place. I coughed and changed the subject. Time heals everything. Trust me, I made a mental note to go check on Bonnie later. This was my mess. Poke and the others comforted Layla too. Even Pernis almost came over but stopped herself. I glanced at the blonde girl and said loud enough for her to hear that the finely dressed young lady seemed to be losing patience, and Layla should go. Pernis lifted her chin and huffed like a proud swan. Exactly the reaction I wanted. Layla apologized once more for Pernis' behavior, bowed, and left with her friends. Once they were farther away, she finally told the group what had happened with her father and the thugs. They were all shocked. Pernis grabbed Layla's hand immediately, full of genuine worry, and offered to have Layla and Bonnie stay at her family's estate, where guards could protect them. So the noble girl did have a heart. She just couldn't stand the smell of blood and pig guts. Layla declined for herself, saying her mother needed her, but agreed it might be good for Bonnie. Back at my stall, I picked up some interesting information from chatting with customers. Several children had gone missing recently, causing panic across town. Families were storming the police station demanding action, which explained all the heavy patrols I'd seen at the entrance. This had to be connected to Layla's father and those thugs. They weren't just kidnappers. They were part of something bigger, targeting young people. Human traffickers. I despised these people in my past life, and I despise them now. If I got the chance, I wouldn't hold back. I'll look into it when I can, I muttered to myself. Then a beautiful voice interrupted my thoughts. How much is this meat, mister? I started answering automatically, but stopped when I saw who was standing at my stall. She was stunning, a wide-brimmed hat, an elegant dark dress, black lace gloves. But her skin was impossibly white, her lips were vivid red, and she looked completely out of place in this market. Everything about her, her appearance, her scent, set off alarms in my body. My blood was stirring restlessly. Miss, there's something very off about you, I said bluntly. That clearly wasn't what she expected. She recovered quickly, smiled, and asked what exactly was off. Everything, I said. She leaned across the counter until her red lips were near my ear. You're not exactly normal either, Mr. Werewolf, she whispered. Oh, you figured it out. I'm so surprised, I said flatly. That threw her off again. She seemed annoyed that a mere werewolf wasn't intimidated by her. She kept her composure, though, and teased me about selling pork in a human town, asking if my pack leader couldn't afford to feed me. I was studying her the whole time. She looked like a vampire, but it was broad daylight. Weren't vampires supposed to fear sunlight? A powerful one, maybe? Leader? What leader? I asked casually. Her eyes went wide. You're a stray? Say that again and see what happens, I snapped. She burst out laughing, covering her mouth, shoulders shaking. I stared at her like she was insane. When she finally stopped, she looked at me again and said something completely out of nowhere. She mentioned something about an old wolf king, apparently some leader of the werewolves. It sounded like she was warning me that this wolf king wouldn't be happy about my existence or something. I zoned out thinking about it. She tried to scare me, saying the wolf king could beat 10 of me easily. I ignored the question entirely and asked if she was going to buy meat or not. That completely blindsided her. "Are you messing with me?" she snapped. I rolled my eyes. "Buy something or get lost. You're hurting my business." She went from amused to furious. Her eyes turned from black to bright red, and a wave of killing intent hit me. The kind that would have a normal werewolf on their knees, shaking. It didn't faze me. I leaned forward on the counter, met those red eyes at close range, and told her word by word to get lost. My voice dropped to something inhuman on the last word. She was shaking with rage, her fingernails piercing through her gloves into the wooden pole. But then, she took a deep breath, smiled again, and calmly asked my name. "I thought you were going to fight me," I said. I gave her my full name and told her she was welcome to come find me if she had a problem. She asked for nothing else and turned to leave. I stopped her. She hadn't given me her name, which I called bad manners. That set her off again. "Murphy. Murphy Elton," she finally said through gritted teeth. Before she left, I asked quietly if she was a vampire. She stared at me in disbelief that I hadn't figured it out sooner, then covered her face in frustration. "As a species that's supposed to be our natural enemy, you're a complete failure." I asked if she was here to hunt humans for food. I was ready to take her down if she said yes. But she went on a disgusted rant about how filthy humans were. Unwashed, covered in sweat, some trying to mask it with even worse smells. She said she'd rather die than drink from them. A noble vampire like her only fed on clean, magical creatures. I relaxed and played along, agreeing that we dirty, low creatures weren't worthy of her refined taste. She actually took the compliment, adjusted her hat, and walked off into the crowd with her chin up. I watched her disappear. "This town isn't as peaceful as it looks," I muttered. Business wound down by evening. I hadn't sold everything this time. Just over 1,000 coppers, less than half of last time. I'd have to deal with the leftover meat myself. I closed my eyes and sniffed the air, searching for a specific scent. A few seconds later I had it. Found her. I pulled my cart toward Bonnie's house. Inside, her mother was standing at the bottom of the stairs, begging Bonnie to come down and eat. Bonnie's voice drifted from upstairs, flat, lifeless. She said she had no appetite and just wanted to be alone. Her mother sat at the table staring at black bread and bean stew, too worried to eat herself. Then I knocked on the door. The woman opened it cautiously, seeing a stranger. I introduced myself politely, said I was Bonnie's friend, and that I'd heard she wasn't doing well. I'd come to check on her. Bonnie's mother was suspicious when I said I was her daughter's friend. She closed the door and went to check. A moment later, Bonnie herself opened it. She looked terrible, much thinner than before, all the cheerfulness gone from her eyes. Like she'd been through a long illness. I told her I'd heard what happened and felt responsible. She tried to tell me it wasn't my fault, but I knew better. I just smiled and didn't argue. I pointed out that she wasn't eating properly and that her mother was worried sick. I kept my voice gentle, like talking to a younger sibling. I told her that shutting herself away wouldn't fix anything, and that it was normal to be shaken after a first experience like that. Then I tried something. "Don't be afraid, Bonnie. There's actually a guardian who's been protecting you." She looked up, confused. I reminded her of what happened that day, how those thugs suddenly let go and ran in terror. Something had scared them off. I told her that something was her guardian. Her eyes went wide. "A guardian?" I leaned in and whispered like I was sharing a secret. "It's actually a super big dog. Somewhere out in the forest, a certain super big dog sneezed. As big as a horse," I continued. "It punishes evil people. That day, it was following you and Layla the whole way. When those men grabbed you, it showed itself and scared them so badly they ran for their lives." Bonnie's whole face transformed. The dull, lifeless expression vanished, replaced by flushed excitement. She couldn't find the right words, so I helped her out. "Pretty cool, right?" "Yes." "So cool," she practically shouted. Her mother burst through the door, alarmed by the noise, then froze when she saw her daughter smiling for the first time in days. Tears streamed down her face. "Bonnie, you're smiling. I thought I'd never see that again." "I'm okay now, Mom," Bonnie said, wiping her mother's tears. Her mom composed herself, told us to keep talking, and stepped back out. I could tell she was an incredible mother. I said so out loud, that having someone love you that much was something to treasure. Bonnie gave me a soft look, and I could tell she was thinking I must be alone in the world, with no one to care about me. She wasn't entirely wrong. "Don't overthink it," I said. "Just speaking from the heart, She moved on to asking about the guardian. Could she see it? She wanted to thank it in person. I told her it stayed near my place, always watching from the shadows when she was nearby, and I could arrange for it to show itself. That's amazing. She bounced on her feet with excitement. Then a strange sound filled the room. She froze, face turning red all the way to her ears. Hungry now? I teased when her stomach growled. Bonnie ducked her head in embarrassment. I stood up and opened the cloth bag I'd brought. A big chunk of pork, a basket of vegetables, oil, seasonings, even a flat pan. Bonnie's mouth fell open. Where's your kitchen? I asked. She pointed, then snapped out of it and tried to stop me, saying the food was too expensive. I reminded her she hadn't been shy about eating at my place. That shut her up. I told her not to worry. I owed her family for the trouble I'd caused. Consider it compensation. I got to work cooking while Bonnie rolled up her sleeves and joined me. I had her wash vegetables and showed her some techniques, telling her that learning to cook well was a valuable skill. She could make food for her mother and friends. She was thrilled at the chance to learn. When Bonnie's mother, Sally, came back inside, the table was covered with steaming dishes and the house smelled incredible. She froze, completely unable to process what had happened to her depressed daughter in such a short time. The three of us ate together. Sally took one bite, and her eyes went wide. Bonnie was already shoveling food in without a care for manners. I loved watching their reactions. Over dinner, I learned about their family. Sally worked at a cotton mill, stable income. She was a widow. Her husband had been beaten to death for offending a passing nobleman. She'd raised Bonnie alone ever since, working hard to keep her in school. Despite losing her father, Bonnie hadn't suffered too badly, thanks to her mother's steady job. After the meal, I said I should go. Both Sally and Bonnie tried to convince me to stay the night. It was late. The town had been unsafe lately, and Bayek was hours away. But sleeping over in someone else's home wasn't something I was comfortable with. I told them not to worry and stepped out into the dark. What I didn't know was that Lord Channies had finally received his letter back. His well-connected friend confirmed that no one named Glenn was on any list of dangerous Bayek residents. The friend had even double-checked through his own channels. Just an ordinary person. That was all Channies needed. He called in his knight, Barbell, and ordered him to capture me and teach me a lesson I'd never forget for striking his son. But he added one firm warning. Under no circumstances was Barbell to enter Bayek. If he provoked something in there, Channies couldn't save him. Channies told his wife he wasn't going to kill me, just punish me. Their family was declining in status, and even killing a commoner could cause complications they couldn't handle. He'd recently tried to build a connection with the Knight Berlin, but had been refused a meeting. Meanwhile, in a quiet tavern in Dude, Murphy the vampire was meeting with someone, a middle-aged man in plain clothes who turned out to be a mage. He was rude and hostile, clearly despising vampires. He demanded she hand over something they'd agreed to trade. Murphy was furious at his attitude. She told him to learn some manners if he wanted to do business. He didn't care. When she tried to walk away, he threatened to expose her castle's location to the great knights and mages. Her eyes turned fully red. The air around them warped with her power, making everyone in the tavern feel a tightness in their chests without knowing why. But the mage was unfazed. He told her flatly that if she started a fight here, she'd be the one who died. A dark mage and a vampire, doing shady deals in the middle of town. This place had more going on beneath the surface than I'd imagined. The next morning, the old man next door knocked on my door. He asked me to go somewhere with him and offered to pay 3 silver coins, which was 300 coppers. Not bad. I had nothing planned except feeding my pigs, so I agreed. He told me to wait outside town while he got ready. I went out, sat on a rock, and whistled for my beast. When it came running, I told it to gather pig grass and feed the pigs while I was gone. It gave me a look like I'd insulted it, but I told it the exercise would do it good. It was getting fat from sleeping and eating all day. Then the old man appeared, and I almost didn't recognize him. Full hunter's outfit, leather backpack, 2 hunting rifles. He looked like a completely different person, imposing, serious, dangerous. Meanwhile, I was standing there in a plain shirt with nothing but the clothes on my back. The old man spotted my beast, and his eyes lit up. "Good dog," he said. I had no words. He asked if it was mine, and I nodded. Then he asked its name. I froze. I'd never given it one. I just sent commands through our mental link. Before I could make something up, the old man looked almost offended on the beast's behalf and offered to name it himself. He circled around it, studying it carefully, and suggested, "Night Howl." I repeated it a couple times. It sounded right. I told the beast its new name was Night Howl. It seemed thrilled. Its eye lit up, and it bared its fangs happily. We left Night Howl behind and walked to a dirt road where a simple horse cart was waiting, just a wooden platform on two wheels pulled by one horse. The driver, a short, muscular man, looked at us strangely. One of us was fully armed, the other looked like he was going on a picnic. The old man shut him up with a cold voice before he could comment. Once we were moving, I finally asked where we were going and what we were doing. "Going to kill someone," the old man said. The driver flinched and peeked back at us. I just nodded and said nothing more. The cart bounced along all day, morning to evening. I'd assumed the trip would be short, but it clearly wasn't. When I asked how much farther, the old man said I should prepare for a long journey. The target probably wouldn't wait around for us. I told him he'd be covering all food and lodging costs. He agreed without hesitation. I was starting to think I should charge more than 3 silver coins. Finally, the cart stopped. I expected another feeding break for the horse, but the driver said, "We're here." Meanwhile, back on the road between Bayek and Dude, I had no idea that Barbell and a squad of armored knights had been lying in ambush, waiting for me. A scout had returned from Bayek's direction with news. I wasn't there. Barbell cursed and ordered everyone to Dude to rest. They'd try again at night. We arrived at a small village, more of a settlement than a proper town. Rough roads, the smell of livestock everywhere. The old man told me we'd stay here for the night and continue tomorrow with a better cart. I doubted this place even had an inn, but it did, a surprisingly large one in the center of the village. An animal skull with horns hung above the entrance, giving it a wild look. Strange shouts came from inside. "Try not to start trouble in there," the old man said as we walked in. "What if trouble finds me?" I asked. He gave a cold little laugh. "Then handle it yourself." The smell of alcohol hit me like a wall. Inside sat all kinds of rough-looking people, sharp-eyed, dangerous. Besides humans, there were dwarves and beast-headed people. The old man quietly pointed out key figures as we walked through. A witch who knew terrifying dark magic, sitting in the back. A powerful wandering swordsman drinking heavily. He told me to avoid them. Then 3 beast-headed men blocked our path. The leader, a bare-headed one, greeted the old man loudly, calling him Old Bull, so that was his name. The old man responded coldly, as usual. The barehead noticed me and burst out laughing, calling me an unweaned baby and asking if I was the old man's son. I kicked him across the room. He crashed through the wall and crumpled in the corner, groaning. Voice that loud, but soft as cotton, I said. Nothing to brag about. The remaining beast heads glared at me with murder in their eyes. I rolled my shoulders, ready to go. But they looked at their leader on the floor, looked at me, and decided to grab their friend and run out of the inn without a single threat. The old man wasn't even surprised. "Have fun," was all he'd said before walking to the front desk. He tossed me a room key and went upstairs to rest. I immediately sat down at the witch's table and asked if she really knew magic. She didn't even look at me. "Stay away if you don't want to die." I told her I wanted to learn, that I could pay or get her whatever she needed. She turned to face me. Her features were normal, even attractive, but her eyes were completely white. Unsettling. "Ignorance will destroy you," she said. "Did it destroy you?" I asked. She smiled with a hint of interest. "All witches are destroyed." Then her tone turned cold again, and she told me dark magic wasn't something I should touch. Before I could argue further, she dissolved into black mist and vanished. I sighed at the empty chair. Then I ordered one of every drink the inn served and charged it all to the old man's tab. Almost everything tasted terrible. I couldn't understand how anyone enjoyed this stuff. Only the fruit juice was bearable. Nothing else interesting happening, so I went to my room and slept. In the morning, a server woke me up with breakfast. I went downstairs chewing on rock-hard bread and found the old man already up, calmly sipping alcohol. "Let's go," he said, standing up immediately. We switched to a covered cart with better seats this time. I asked if we'd arrive today. He said we should, barring surprises. I closed my eyes and wondered if Night Howl was doing a good job feeding the pigs. Somewhere out there, in a house I knew nothing about, 3 figures in dark robes and pointed hats stood over a lifeless body, thick energy pouring from their hands. In the corner of the room, 2 little boys, maybe 6 or 7 years old, huddled together, watching in absolute terror. We arrived at a lush, overgrown area, vegetation taller than a person, packed tight around the trees. I asked if this was really the destination. The old man studied the ground and said probably. I told him 3 silver coins wasn't enough for this trip. He bumped it to 5 without blinking. Rich as I suspected. He tossed me a bottle of some cold ointment and told me to smear it on myself to mask my scent. It smelled like herbs and cleared my head. I didn't ask questions, just applied it. I activated a thin layer of wolf toxin across my skin for protection and followed him into the dense brush. Visibility was almost zero, but the old man moved through it like he could see everything. After half an hour, we reached an open clearing. He raised his hand. Stop. There are magical traps here, he said quietly. I looked carefully but couldn't spot anything unusual. It was just unnervingly silent. The old man pulled out a small pouch, got down on all fours like a lizard, and started crawling forward. For his age, the strength and flexibility were impressive. He told me to follow exactly where he stepped. Every few meters he'd sprinkle some kind of powder around us before continuing. When we reached the center, I finally asked how he'd known about the traps. He explained that the layout of plants and water pools formed a pattern, a cleverly disguised magic circle. No human or animal traces anywhere, which itself was the giveaway. The powder helped him locate the trigger points, though he said it required decades of experience to use properly. How do you know all this? I asked. He glanced at me. I used to be a doctor of magical studies at Sosradran University in the Zane Kingdom. My jaw dropped. Sosradran was the kingdom's top institution. This grumpy, old neighbor of mine was a university doctor. So you can use magic? I asked eagerly. I'm not a mage. I can't cast spells, he said flatly. He explained that anyone could study magical theory, but being a mage required at least 60% elemental affinity. Without that, learning magic was pointless. A magical studies doctor served mages instead, brewing potions, calculating spell circle circuits, deriving incantations. Even legendary mages would fight over someone with his skills. So basically a world-class support specialist. Useful to know. Before we could talk more, he raised his rifle. We've been spotted. Deal with the trouble first. I'd already heard the rapid footsteps. 5 figures in black robes burst out of the brush, claws like sickles extending from their hands, wreathed in dark energy. The first attacker lunged at the old man with a shriek. Without flinching, the old man pulled the trigger and put a bullet right between the attacker's eyes. The body hit the dirt and rolled to a stop. The other 4 rushed in together. I was about to jump in when the old man did something that froze me in place. He tore open his shirt, revealing a black hole in the center of his chest. A swarm of black tentacles exploded outward from it and ripped all 4 attackers to shreds in an instant. Then the tentacles snapped back inside. The old man immediately collapsed, clutching his chest, drenched in sweat, veins bulging across his body. Whatever that power was, it came with a terrible price. Why did you do that? I asked, standing over him. You could have let me handle a few low-level thugs. There was no reason to put yourself through this. The old man's pain passed quickly. He stood up, breathing hard, and said he had to kill those people personally. I pointed at the black hole in his chest and asked what it was. A demon I made a contract with, he said. I frowned. Demon contracts were known to come with a heavy price. He cut me off, saying the cost was something he could bear. Whatever grudge he was carrying, it ran deep. We kept moving toward where the attackers had come from. Somewhere ahead, in a crude wooden shack, the old man's real target, a hunched, ancient figure with bone wings growing from his back, dried-out skin, and a glowing green cauldron, was talking with a dark mage named Dake. Dake was the same man who'd done that shady deal with Murphy the vampire. They'd noticed their puppet fighters were destroyed, and the old ones sent Dake out to handle us. The old man walked calmly, not rushing at all. I asked if he wasn't worried the target would run. He said they wouldn't. In their eyes, we were just foolish intruders. A ball of dark purple fog shot out of the forest at us. The old man dodged smoothly. It came at me next. I tilted my head and let it pass. Dake stepped out, wrapped in terrifying dark energy, full of arrogance. You're unlucky to have met me. This will be the worst experience of your lives. The old man's voice went tight. A level 4 dark mage. Is level 4 strong? I asked casually. That set Dake off completely. He raised his hands. chanted almost instantly, and a complex magic circle appeared beneath him. The old man shouted a warning. I felt a targeting lock on me and launched myself straight at Dake like a cannonball. He laughed, calling me stupid. A tree sapling burst from the ground between us and exploded in size, swallowing us both. Thousands of needle-like roots pierced my body and started draining my blood at a terrifying rate. I didn't panic. I pushed my wolf toxin through those same roots, poisoning the tree from the inside out. It started cracking apart, tiny breaking sounds everywhere, and then the whole thing collapsed. I emerged from the wreckage. Before I could move, Dake had already launched his second spell, a crackling lightning chain that whipped toward my waist. I flipped sideways to dodge and extended my wolf claws on one hand, slashing at his face. The chain behind me obliterated a wide swath of trees with an explosion like a bomb blast. My claws scraped against his magical shield with a piercing shriek. He started taunting me, saying my claws were too weak to break through. But I'd already measured the shield's strength on first contact. It wasn't unbreakable, it just needed enough hits. I became a blur. Claw marks covered his entire field of vision. The constant scratching sounds made Dake panic. He poured everything into maintaining his shield and couldn't spare any focus to cast offensive spells back at me. This was his fatal flaw. He was a so-called genius who'd never faced a real fight. Before going dark, everything had been handed to him. Even after becoming a criminal, he'd never met anyone who could push him. So the moment things got difficult, he crumbled. Impossible. I'm a great level 4 mage. You can't beat me, he screamed, hands shaking. I thought you'd be impressive. Turns out you're just a giant baby, I said as my claw punched through his shield. I grabbed his face, shoved his head into the ground, and held it there. Blood oozed between my fingers. The old man walked over and looked down at the barely alive Dake. He had so many devastating spells he never even used. And he lost like this. Even if he'd used them, the result would have been the same, I said, standing up and dusting off my hands. I wasn't going full power either. The old man stared at my arms shifting back to normal, clearly thinking hard. I knew he had questions. Partial wolf transformation wasn't something normal werewolves could do. But he didn't press, and I didn't explain. I could smell someone else deeper in the forest. I told the old man to hurry. The real target was still out there. But he shook his head calmly. The target had already fled. He was certain of it. I suggested we follow the trail to the real target, but the old man said that cunning enemy would have left traps behind. He knew his opponent well. This was clearly a deep grudge. He said the trip was over and we should head back. For a moment, he didn't look like a fearsome hunter. He just looked like a lonely old man. Then I spotted something huge flying toward us at high speed. The old man looked up and cursed, a griffin rider. His real target had led them straight to us. What do we do? Fight, I asked. He panicked, the first time I'd ever seen that from him. He said it didn't matter if I could beat them. If Griffin Knights saw our faces, they'd track us down using their systems. Life as we knew it would be over. Easy fix, I said, and transformed into my full wolf form. My voice came out deep as a demon's. I'll hold them off. You run. He asked if I was sure. I told him I never did anything I wasn't sure about. If you die, I'll mourn you. If you succeed, 20 silver coins, he said, then disappeared into the forest. 20 silvers, about what I'd make selling one pig. Not bad. The griffin was massive. 3 riders sat on its back, all women in fitted silver armor that showed off their athletic builds. I launched myself from the treetops and slammed into the griffin's chest midair, knocking it off balance. All 3 riders fell. They weren't amateurs. They coated themselves in night combat aura during the fall and landed hard, cratering the ground but unharmed. When I stepped out of the forest in full werewolf form, they stared. A werewolf, one said. It can talk, said another. I learned something interesting. Apparently werewolves can't normally speak after transforming. I'd only managed it by manipulating the wolf toxin in my throat. Their captain, a tall woman with a high brown ponytail, identified me as a level 3 werewolf. She seemed certain. Then she accused me of having eaten people to reach that level. I'd never do something that disgusting, I said, rolling my eyes. She told her 2 companions to stand back and declared she'd handle me alone. The fighting spirit radiating off her was sharp and fierce. I was thrilled. This was every martial artist's instinct, the excitement of facing a skilled opponent. I whittled a thick wooden stick from a nearby tree with my claws and held it ready. She almost laughed. "You're going to fight my knight's sword with a stick?" Truly a mindless creature, she shot forward like a beam of light, thrusting at my throat. It looked devastating, but I could tell the real killing power was only in the center. The flashy light on the sides was just for show. I sidestepped and jabbed my stick at her wrist. She nearly lost her grip on the sword. Only her two-handed hold and years of training saved her from dropping it. The ultimate disgrace for a knight. She planted her foot and converted her thrust into a sweep. I'd already anticipated it. I swung the stick in an arc, smashed it into the flat of her blade, then twisted and kicked her in the stomach. She flew backward into a tree. Her two companions cried out and moved to help, but she stopped them with a raised hand. "I'm fine," she said, touching her stomach. My kick hadn't even broken through her protective aura. No real damage. "Your technique is full of openings, knight," I said from where I stood, not bothering to chase. I smiled. "Don't get cocky. I was just careless." The knight captain charged again, this time with glowing golden wings appearing behind her and her sword extending with some kind of enhancement. Her speed jumped dramatically. She thrust forward and a dozen phantom swords appeared around the real one, covering every direction I could dodge. Impressive, but I just jumped 5 or 6 meters straight up, grabbed a treetop, and launched myself behind her. She blocked with a massive glowing shield that materialized out of thin air. I landed and looked at her with all her special effects going, and I couldn't help myself. "Knight, this isn't fun. I'm using a wooden stick. If you've got skill, beat me with your swordsmanship alone. What's the point of all these flashy tricks?" She actually agreed. Turned everything off. Pure sword against my stick. Now it got exciting. She was genuinely skilled. In my old world, she would have ranked among the absolute best swordsmen globally. She pulled out every technique she'd ever learned, and each one was refined and precise. But she was fighting me. My family had called me a once-in-a-century martial arts prodigy. I'd mastered every weapon style in our family system by 16, then sharpened everything further through years of military combat. Even in this new body without muscle memory, relying purely on mental knowledge and werewolf reflexes, I was more than enough. After hundreds of exchanges, I'd hit her all over her body. She hadn't touched a single hair on me. She got angrier and angrier, until I smacked her backside with the stick. It made a crisp, ringing sound. She slammed her sword into the ground and cursed. Everyone froze. Me, the other two knights. Maybe I shouldn't have hit her there. She glared at me, breathing hard, teeth grinding. I was about to say something comforting, but she spoke first. "I will defeat you." She picked up her sword, walked to her companions, whistled for the griffin, and mounted up. "We're leaving." One of her partners asked about me. She said to leave me alone. This werewolf hadn't harmed anyone. They didn't understand, but she'd felt it during our fight. Her knight's heart, some kind of inner sense, told her I had no violence or malice in me. She also knew I'd been holding back most of my power. If I'd wanted to, none of them would have escaped. As the griffin rose into the sky, she called down to me. "Remember this, Mr. Werewolf. I'm Windsor Bayard, squad leader of the Griffin Knight Order's 7th Division. Next time I find you, I'll beat you personally." I smiled. I was looking forward to it. I found the old man sitting by a chicken coop at some farm, eating bread and staring at nothing. I threw a pebble at his knee from the bushes to get his attention. I was naked again after transforming. He bought clothes from a terrified farmer, and once I was dressed, he asked if I'd killed the Griffin Knights. I rolled my eyes and told him they were 3 women with incredible figures who knew they were outmatched and retreated. He nodded casually and mentioned that Griffin Knights were almost all female. Women had better coordination and lighter bodies for aerial combat. Then he said he had other business to handle and told me to go home alone. I didn't care what he was doing. I just wanted my money. He tossed me a coin pouch. I didn't bother counting it. We were neighbors. He wouldn't cheat me. After parting with the old man, I cut through mountains and fields instead of taking the main road, faster that way. My new clothes got shredded by branches, but they were ugly and stank anyway, so I didn't care. Halfway home, I caught the smell of rotting flesh. I followed it to a farmhouse in the woods. Inside, I found a family of 5, parents and 3 children, the oldest maybe 14, the youngest around 7 or 8. The 2 little ones had their necks snapped. The others looked like something had drained the life from their bodies, sunken eyes, wasted muscles. Only 7 or 8 years old. I buried them all, one by one. I'd seen worse in my old life during missions, but it never got easier. Back then, I had rules and chains holding me back. Not anymore. In this world, nobody could stop me from doing what I felt was right. I picked up the trail. My nose led me to a dead tree with a hollow big enough for people to hide in. 3 dark mages were inside, trying to contact their leader about a new meeting point. They never finished the conversation. I burst in so fast they couldn't even start chanting their defensive spells. 1 hit each, their protective magic shattered, and they dropped unconscious. When the first one woke up, all 3 were hanging upside down from a dead tree. I was sitting by a campfire, roasting a bird. That family of 5. You killed them, right? I asked without looking up. He laughed and confirmed it proudly. Called their flavor delicious. Asked if I wanted details. I stood up calmly. I have no connection to them. I just don't like people like you. I had some free time, so I came to kill you. He went into a rage about how mages were superior beings, how commoners like me had no right to oppose them. I waited for him to finish. Then I told them I wanted them to feel what it was like for life to slowly drain away. I extended a single claw, opened a long cut on each of their arms, and tied them so the blood could flow freely. They screamed, cursed, and threatened me. I listened like it was pleasant music. Save your energy, I said. Something more painful is coming. You'll want your voice for later. I walked away. Moments after I left, small rodent-like creatures, sharp-toothed, rat-like things, crept out from under dead leaves and hollow logs by the hundreds, drawn by the blood. They swarmed up the tree toward the 3 hanging mages. The screaming that followed echoed across the sky. Dealing with those monsters put me in a much better mood. Sometimes you just have to do what makes you feel right. I walked through the night, passing the occasional farmer who stared at me like I was a homeless beggar. Fair enough, my clothes were in tatters. This whole region was clearly on the kingdom's outer edge. Everything was underdeveloped. I couldn't even find a horse to buy, which frustrated me. I was tired of pulling carts by hand. Just as I was approaching the outskirts near Bayek, a fancy carriage pulled up beside me and slowed down. I didn't need to look. My nose already told me who was inside. The curtain pulled back to reveal a pretty blonde girl with a teasing smile. Pernis. Look, mother, there's a beggar in rags on the road. How pathetic, she said playfully. A dignified woman sat deeper inside, chin slightly raised, eyes half open, radiating authority. Pernis, don't waste time on irrelevant things, her mother said coolly. Pernis tried to tease me from the carriage window, but I decided to play along. I grabbed the window frame and started climbing in. She screamed at me to get off, yelling about the smell. Her mother panicked too, calling for the butler. A chubby man in butler's clothes jumped down and yanked my pants so hard I had to let go before they fell off. I sat on the ground laughing so hard my stomach hurt. The butler wanted to punch me, but Pernis' mother called him back and they drove away. Through the window, I caught a glimpse of Pernis with her cheeks puffed out like a bun, pouting furiously. Her mother told her that expression wasn't suitable for a noblewoman. I wiped tears of laughter from my eyes and kept walking. At the edge of Bayek's forest, Night Howl came charging out to greet me, shoving its giant eye right into my face. I pushed it away and asked about the pigs. Everything was fine, though the pig grass was scattered everywhere in the pen. Good enough. I couldn't expect too much from a monster-playing farmer. I checked on the elk-like creature I'd caught. It was almost horse-sized. Killing it for meat seemed like a waste. Maybe I could train it to pull a cart instead. It walked over thinking I had food. I patted its head and left it alone for now. Walking into town, I passed an ancient, hunched old woman I recognized from Dylan's memories. Dylan had tried talking to her once, but she'd treated him like he didn't exist. As I passed her this time, I felt her eyes lock onto me and stay there until I went inside my house. She might have sensed something. Maybe she knew I was a werewolf. Very possible. Meanwhile, I had no idea what the old man, whose name was apparently Bull, was doing after we split up. He'd gone to a larger town called Chesvino, to a magic discussion club, where he met with a woman named Defa. She was a refined, 40-something mage in elegant robes. She'd been waiting for him. She was the one who'd used divination magic to locate his enemy's position. When she heard the target had escaped again, she sighed but wasn't surprised. Bull handed her some crumpled parchments, magical calculations he'd completed for her, with notes on which spells and formations wouldn't work. It seemed to be their arrangement. She provided intelligence. He provided his expertise as a former doctor of magical studies. She tried to talk him into letting go of his vendetta, saying a person couldn't live consumed by hatred forever. He shut that down firmly. He'd chosen this path and wouldn't be swayed. Then he mentioned, almost casually, that a level 4 dark mage had been guarding his enemy. Defa nearly jumped out of her chair. A level 4 dark mage shouldn't have been out in such a remote area. They were all supposed to be near the capital region. She said she'd need to investigate which level 4 mage had recently gone missing. She asked how Bull had survived an encounter with someone that powerful, since the demon in his chest couldn't handle that level of threat. He smiled and said he'd hired a capable fighter. Someone who can fight a level 4 mage? Where did you find them? The cost must have been enormous, she pressed. An annoying kid. At first I didn't know he had the power to, well, not fight. Kill a level 4 mage. Kill? Bull explained that while the dark mage hadn't used his full power, his hired fighter was clearly stronger than a level 4 mage regardless. Defa sat in stunned silence for a long time. Finally Bull broke it. As for the cost, I paid him 20 silver coins. Back at Bull's meeting with the mage Defa, she was apparently shocked that he'd only paid 20 silver coins to someone who could kill a level 4 mage. She asked if they were close friends. Not at all. He even killed one of my dogs, the old man said, gritting his teeth. Defa asked if he'd basically scammed me. Bull coughed and said he hadn't known my true value at the time, so it wasn't really his fault. When she asked what kind of fighter I was, a mage or a level 4 knight, he told her I was a werewolf. She recoiled instinctively. As a proper mage, she found creatures like werewolves repulsive by nature. But Bull explained that I was different. I kept full rational control after transforming and could even speak, which was supposed to be impossible. He swore he'd seen it with his own eyes. Defa murmured something about me possibly being a new species. Bull added that I'd only recently become a werewolf, and before that I'd been a timid, cowardly person who completely changed after infection. Now you've made me curious about him, she said, her eyes gleaming with scholarly interest. Don't try anything. You can't beat him, Bull warned. She smiled slyly and said she'd use softer methods. Bull's eye twitched. He's still just a kid, he said. Meanwhile, I was back home working on a new plan to make money. Selling pork was decent income, but too slow for what I needed. The black pig population was limited, and overhunting wasn't sustainable. I decided to let the remaining pigs breed and find another income source in the meantime. Woodworking. My childhood neighbor had been a carpenter, and his son was my best friend growing up. I'd picked up plenty of skills just hanging around and had done hands-on work myself. With my werewolf claws and needle-hard body hair, I could cut, shape, drill, and polish wood without needing most tools. I chopped down trees, processed them into lumber, and started building furniture. By late afternoon, I produced over a dozen chairs, tables, and stools, all well-crafted, comparable to what a professional would make. Near sunset, I noticed I had a visitor. The puppet girl, Aina, was sitting on a rock nearby, watching me with childlike curiosity. She'd been there for a while. I'd sensed her but didn't react, staying focused on my work. Why are you making these things? She finally asked. To sell them, of course, I said casually. She studied the furniture with obvious longing. These are beautiful. You like them? Want one? She nodded eagerly. 40 copper coins each, I said, holding up 4 fingers. She touched her clean dress and went quiet. I don't have any money, she whispered. I'd expected that. Seeing her deflated expression, I offered one for free, on account of her being such an appreciative audience. My real motive was to build some rapport and eventually learn more about her and her creator. She lit up immediately and bounced over to the finished pieces with movements so light and fluid they looked like martial arts footwork. For a wooden puppet, there was zero stiffness, magic craftsmanship at its finest. After much deliberation, she chose the folding table, the most intricate piece. She held it up, spinning in happy circles. Her excitement seemed a bit much for a table, but I didn't question it. I asked about her brother, the other puppet. She made an incredibly human, mischievous face and said she'd snuck out while he was sleeping. The expressiveness was startling. If not for the visible joints and hinges, you'd never guess she wasn't alive. I asked who created them. She hesitated, head down, and said softly that her brother had told her never to discuss their master with others. I backed off immediately and changed the subject. My name is Glenn Nabankru. Nice to meet you. We're friends now. She froze for a moment, then got visibly flustered and performed a formal noble's curtsy. Mr. Glenn, I'm Aina Tismorn. Very pleased to meet you too. Aina and I kept talking as I worked. She was starved for conversation. She said she couldn't even remember the last time she'd spoken to anyone besides her brother. I learned some fascinating things about Bayek. She and Polindis had lived here for over 100 years, but she said they were still considered new residents. The real old-timers never appeared on the outskirts. A helpful neighbor had once told them that the original residents were like one family, sleeping deep in the town center. They stayed hidden to avoid hurting anyone and to keep the town mayor company. The strange creatures roaming at night? They were actually the mayor's pets. They wouldn't harm residents. That folding table was the best investment I'd ever made. When night fell, Aina suddenly panicked. She'd lost track of time and her brother would be furious. She turned to run, but I told her not to bother hurrying. Polindis was already here. Sure enough, he stepped out of the darkness. Aina, you've disappointed me, he said, though his eyes were fixed on me. She apologized sincerely, and he told her to go home. She picked up her skirt and ran. Before following, Polindis looked at me and said something I didn't expect. Thank you for keeping her company. I haven't seen her that happy in a long time. I joked that I'd expected him to warn me to stay away from his sister. His fist tightened. He clearly wanted to hit me, but he held it together. I can tell right from wrong, strange kid, he said, and left. The next morning, I loaded my finished furniture onto the cart and decided to test out the elk creature as a draft animal. It had gotten used to me by now and didn't resist when I strapped the cart to it. The deer cart was slower than a horse, but far better than walking. I sat back and enjoyed being a driver for once. The peace didn't last. Just outside Bayek's territory, a group of armored men blocked the road. Their leader wore noble knight's armor. Barbell, the personal knight of Lord Channies. Kid, you've offended a noble. Lord Channies wants you brought in. Get down and come with us, he said, hand on his sword. Channies? I raised an eyebrow. Oh, the curly-haired poodle's dad. Insolent. A lowly commoner daring to disrespect nobility, Barbell roared. His soldiers drew their weapons, sunlight flashing off the blades. They expected me to be terrified. I was calm, thinking about my furniture. The real question was whether to go with them and deal with the Lord directly, or just beat them all up here. I actually wanted to go. Settling things with the family sounded more efficient. I was just worried about leaving my goods unattended. Fine, I'll come. But let me hide my stuff first, I said. Barbell almost snapped at me for making demands, but something about my complete lack of fear, plus the fact that I lived in Bayek, made him think twice. He nodded. I drove the deer cart into a rocky corner, tied the elk to a tree, and joined their group on foot. They all had horses. I walked. I'd add this indignity to the bill when we arrived. At Channies' estate, the Lord was in his garden chatting and laughing with another nobleman, a guest with a curled goatee and a dramatic way of speaking. They seemed like old friends. Before I arrived, Channies had been chatting in his garden with a visiting nobleman named Lord Kuro. They were discussing getting Ravel into the Night Temple as an apprentice. Apparently Channies' noble title was about to expire. It wasn't inherited permanently in this kingdom, so his children needed to earn their own noble status. Getting Ravel accepted as a formal knight was their best option. Kuro agreed to use his connections to help. Old boys network at its finest. Then a maid came in to announce that Barbell had returned with me. Channies' smile vanished instantly. Walking into the estate, I had to admit it was impressive. Perfectly trimmed hedges, carved stone fountains, maids tending to everything like professional gardeners. Part of me felt a pang of nostalgia, and I knew that was Dylan's old memories stirring. He'd grown up in a place like this. A shrill voice cut through my thoughts. That's him. Mom. That's him. Ravel and his mother Sophia were marching toward me, faces full of fury. Sophia looked down at me with her chin raised. So you're the one who hit my precious son? I didn't answer her. I looked at Ravel instead and said, looks like I really didn't hit you hard enough. Sophia exploded. Soldiers raised their swords. Someone pulled out a flintlock pistol. The maids scattered behind the hedges, whispering about how I was going to be executed. Ravel laughed and told me I'd be hanged. I wasn't worried. Don't rush, I said calmly, pushing aside a sword tip that was about to poke my nose. Not everyone's here yet. Right on cue, Channies and Kuro walked in. Channy's glared at me with ice-cold eyes and asked who gave me the courage to touch his son. I laughed. I was in a bad mood that day. Your son looked like a good punching bag, so I hit him. Any problems? Dead silence. Then everyone's eyes went wide. The maids gasped behind the hedges. Kuro nearly pulled off his own goatee in shock. Good. Very good, Channy said through clenched teeth, face turning deep red. If I'd been another noble talking like this, they could have handled it. But a commoner, dressed in plain clothes, treating them like they were nothing, that was beyond what they could stomach. Sophia snapped. She grabbed a knight's sword from a nearby soldier and swung it straight at my face. I raised my hand and caught the blade in my palm. It couldn't cut my skin. She pulled and yanked, but the sword didn't budge, like it was set in concrete. Channy's yelled at Barbell to pull his wife away, but Barbell didn't move. His palms were sweating. As a level 1 knight, he was the only one here who understood what my casual display of strength actually meant. The kind of muscle control needed to catch a blade barehanded without flinching meant I was at least as strong as him. Maybe stronger. His mistress's life was now in my hands. Sir, we can't fight him, Barbell said quietly. This kid is dangerous. Channy's mind went blank. I lifted the sword, and Sophia with it, right off the ground. Ravel screamed and charged at me, punching and biting. I glanced at Channy's. He was shaking, mouthing, please don't. I wasn't stopping. When Sophia's grip was about to give out, I yanked the sword free and struck her stomach with the hilt. She flew backward, caught by Barbell and the soldiers. She was unconscious. Channy screamed for someone to bring their best healing potion. Then he noticed I had Ravel by the throat, dangling off the ground. All his arrogance evaporated. Please, don't hurt my only son, he was begging now. No more noble dignity, just a terrified father. I noticed something interesting during all this. Lord Kuro, the visiting nobleman, had been quietly watching with a look of growing contempt toward Channy's. He also whispered something under his breath, too quiet for anyone normal to hear. But I caught it. He was talking to someone invisible, asking if they could take me down. A voice in his head, some kind of hidden assassin, replied that they couldn't read my strength and that I'd already noticed their presence. Kuro was shocked that his supposedly undetectable killer had been spotted. The assassin confirmed I was subtly guarding against their direction. So Kuro stayed silent. Good instinct on their part. When Ravel's face turned purple and his eyes started rolling back, I finally let go. He dropped to the ground coughing violently. Don't move, I told Channy's as he stepped forward. His life is still in my hands. Now we could negotiate. First, I told him he owed me for the day's lost business since his men had dragged me here. I asked for 10 gold coins. Everyone's eyes went wide. That was an outrageous sum for one day's work. But Channy's was in no position to argue. He agreed. I never said paying the compensation means I'll release him, I added. Channy's nearly lost his mind. Barbell had to physically hold him back. I told him calmly to think about how the commoners he'd oppressed over the years had felt. Now he was experiencing the same helplessness. Then the maid returned with the healing potion, a pale green liquid in a glass vial. I watched with genuine curiosity as they poured it into Sophia's mouth. She woke up instantly. Impressive effectiveness, though I couldn't gauge its full capabilities from one use. Sophia spotted Ravel at my feet and tried to rush over, but Channy's held her back and explained the situation. She started begging too. I pointed at the empty potion vial. Give me 100 bottles of that. Everyone nearly fell over. Channy's face crumpled. He said he only had 5 total, collected over 2 generations. They'd just used one, so 4 remained. 100 was impossible. I studied his face carefully. He wasn't lying. Fine. For bottles then. He looked pained, but ordered a maid to bring all of them. She glared at me with teary eyes before running off to fetch them. Barbell brought over a wooden box containing the 4 healing potions, a bag of gold coins, and some lesser healing potions. I noticed him considering whether to make a move while handing it over, but he thought better of it. Smart man. With everything in hand, Channy's begged me to return his son. I looked down at Ravel. The kid was shaking, playing the terrified victim perfectly, but I could see the hatred and rage hiding behind those eyes. I'd seen that look too many times in my past life. His acting was amateur. No, I said. Real terror hit Ravel then. Channy screamed, demanding to know why. Sophia shrieked from his arms. I told them I'd never actually promised anything, but I also assured them I wouldn't kill the boy. What I planned to do was take him with me. as a laborer. Since they clearly couldn't raise their son properly, I'd do it for them. Nobody had expected that. The silence was brief before both parents refused at the top of their lungs. Their precious child, whom they'd never dared scold, being taken by someone they considered a monster? I turned cold. I reminded them that they'd started this by trying to have me killed. The fact that I hadn't slaughtered everyone here was already mercy, given only because I respected that they genuinely loved their child. My killing intent swept across the room. Every soldier stiffened. Even the hidden assassin lurking near Kuro felt the chill. Channies asked how he could know I wouldn't hurt Ravel. I laughed. You don't get to choose. You listen to me. Sophia buried her face in her husband's chest and cried. Channies went blank. Nobody objected when I reached for Ravel. Don't touch me, the kid screamed. I slapped him. He went quiet after that. As I was leaving, Channies called out. He wanted to send someone along to look after Ravel. He summoned a maid named Tia, the same girl who'd brought the potions. Big eyes, pretty face, clearly trusted by the family. One look and I knew she wasn't an ordinary maid. Her physique and the calluses on her hands told me she could fight. So Channies was trying to plant a bodyguard next to his son. Cute. I didn't care. She wouldn't change anything. Fine. Just her, I said. Before leaving, I warned everyone not to spread word about what happened today. I made a point of looking directly at Kuro, who flinched. Then I left, walking down the road with a sulking noble brat and a worried maid behind me. Tia finally gathered the courage to ask where I was taking them and whether I'd hurt Ravel. Of course I will. If he doesn't behave, I said flatly. Ravel turned white. Tia puffed up and challenged me, saying I shouldn't bully him just because he defended me. I asked her why it was fine for them to bully me first, but not okay when I returned the favor. She went silent, unable to find an answer. I asked whether the nobles had ever hit or scolded their servants. She immediately defended them. Channies and Sophia had bad tempers, but never physically abused their staff. Ravel's answer surprised me. When I suggested he might have done terrible things to the female servants, he turned red and shouted that his mother had strictly forbidden him from bullying servants or harassing women. It was beneath a noble's dignity. This family was strange, awful to outsiders, but apparently had some internal standards. Still, picking a fight with me was their mistake, and I intended to make the kid learn what it felt like to be on the other side. From Dylan's memories, plenty of noble children had blood on their hands and bullied commoners for fun. Ravel wasn't that type. If he had been, I probably would have killed him already. My instincts about killers were rarely wrong. We made it back to where I'd hidden the deer cart. Everything was still there. The elk was calmly munching grass and nuzzled against me when I approached. Ravel and Tia stared at it with wide, curious eyes. I loaded them onto the cart, and we rolled into Bayek. The creepy atmosphere got to them immediately. Tia whispered to Ravel about scary forests from Bard stories. He snapped at her to shut up. I didn't explain anything, just drove faster. When we arrived at my house, Ravel looked disgusted. You expect me to live here? I pointed at the tiny shed next to the house, barely bigger than a doghouse. No, you're living there. That's a kennel, he protested, pointing at the empty mansion next door instead. That's not my property. And even if it were, you wouldn't get it. Complain again and I'll beat you, I said. He went quiet, though his eyes burned with hatred. Tia offered to clean the shed for him, but I cut her off. Ravel had to do it himself. If it wasn't done by dark, he'd get a beating. Tia protested fiercely, saying the young master had never done manual labor. I told her the same thing I told everyone. Here, I made the rules. I showed her to a spare room inside my house and told her she'd be doing housework, cleaning chores. She complained she was here to look after Ravel, not be my maid. I repeated myself and walked out. Ravel was already reluctantly fumbling through the cleanup, looking completely clueless. I didn't care about his process, only results. I drove the deer cart to the pig pen to drop off my furniture and do my daily check. Everything was fine. Night Howl was on duty. That night, back in Dude, something dark happened that I only learned about later. A boy walking alone through the empty streets was grabbed from behind by a tall shadow, one of Glass's people, trying to kidnap another child. But the mustache police captain and his team had set a trap. A gunshot rang out, hitting the kidnapper's hand. Officers swarmed in. The captain got close enough to land a solid punch to the man's face. But before they could take him down, A burst of purple smoke shot from the attacker's coat and hit the captain in the chest. It scrambled his brain instantly. He collapsed, foaming at the mouth, unconscious. The kidnapper escaped into the night. Ravel didn't finish cleaning the shed by dark, so I beat him. His face was swollen the next morning. Tia looked pained, but kept quiet. I'd scared her with how hard I'd gone. On top of the bruises, Ravel had dark circles under his eyes. Not from pain, from terror. He'd seen the creatures that roamed Bayek's streets at night. Twisted things he couldn't describe, searching and scavenging in the darkness. He'd wet himself and stayed awake all night, desperate to leave but too afraid to disobey me. At breakfast, I told him there'd be no rest today. More tasks were coming, and failing meant another beating. He nodded weakly, poking at his food. Tia snuck extra food onto his plate and glanced at me nervously. I let it go. I told him that meals were conditional. No completed tasks, no dinner. After eating, Tia started on housework without being told. I took Ravel to the pig pen. The faint smell of pig dung hit his nose, but that wasn't what froze him. Night Howl was sitting right there, staring at him with that one glowing eye. "This is Night Howl. He'll be keeping you safe," I said casually. Then I pointed at the pen. "Your job today is feeding the pigs. Cut grass, chop it up, put it in the trough. I'll show you how. You know the consequences if you fail." I left him there and drove my deer cart to Dude with the furniture I'd made. Outside Dude, the police presence was even heavier than before. More patrols, stricter checkpoints. The child kidnappers still hadn't been caught. The officers who recognized me waved me through quickly. My furniture attracted attention the moment I rolled into the central street. People stared at both the unusual designs and the odd-looking elk pulling my cart. Good, free advertising. I set up my display and made a simple price list. A crowd gathered almost immediately. People were fascinated by the craftsmanship. When I demonstrated the folding stool, collapsing it into a small wooden block with a few moves, they gasped. The folding lounge chair got even more reactions. I'd expected to sell everything by evening at best. Instead, everything was gone within the first hour. I couldn't believe it. What I didn't know was that these unique pieces would eventually spark a trend across the entire Zane kingdom and earn me a small reputation in certain circles. I had one last job, a door installation at a customer's house. A woman named Mrs. Ryan had bought a door frame and needed it fitted on the second floor. Her home was clearly middle class, nicely decorated. She greeted me warmly and offered me hot water before I started. While she explained the job, a bedroom door near a window that made annoying noises when the window was left open, my ears picked up faint coughing from somewhere else in the house. It wasn't coming from her. I grabbed my tools and headed upstairs. Mrs. Ryan tried to help me move things out of the way upstairs, but I stopped her. "Ma'am, you're pregnant. You shouldn't be doing heavy work." She was shocked. She'd only just found out herself. I told her I knew a bit of medicine and could tell. Really, it was my enhanced senses combined with some basic medical knowledge. While measuring the door frame, I asked about the coughing I'd heard. Her face filled with worry. Her husband worked at the police station and had been hurt on duty the night before. He'd been bedridden with unexplained weakness ever since. A doctor had already visited but couldn't find the cause. I offered to take a look. She was immediately grateful, though I warned her not to get her hopes too high. She led me into the bedroom, and there was the mustached police captain, Doug, or Captain Doug Ray, as people called him. He recognized me right away and seemed confused about why a butcher-turned-carpenter was now offering medical services. "I have a lot of skills," I said with a shrug. I took his wrist like an old Chinese doctor taking a pulse. The couple looked impressed by the unfamiliar technique. In truth, my medical knowledge wasn't that deep, just military field training. The real reason I'd volunteered was that my werewolf senses had already detected something wrong. Without anyone noticing, I extended a tiny claw tip from my finger and pierced just beneath his skin. I sent a controlled thread of wolf toxin through his blood vessels, searching for the source of the problem. Near his heart, I found it, an unknown energy mass, feeding on his life force. My wolf toxin got pulled toward it the moment it got close. After several careful attempts, I figured out I could wrap the toxin around this energy and drag it out. I found the problem, I told them. They both gasped. I said I'd treat him using a special technique I'd once learned. Then I pointed 2 fingers at his chest and tapped several spots in rapid succession, completely random, purely for show. while simultaneously withdrawing the purple energy through my other hand, hiding the faint mist behind my back. Doug Ray felt the change instantly. The weakness, chest tightness, and headaches vanished. He called it a miracle. He'd known that the purple fog that hit him during last night's operation was some kind of dark magic, and he couldn't believe I'd cured it with such a strange method. "Do you know magic?" he asked directly. I kept a straight face and told him the technique was called the sunflower pressure point method, a special treatment for unusual conditions. His case just happened to be a good fit. Sunflower? He looked completely baffled. But it sounded impressive enough that he didn't question it further. Mrs. Ryan was fighting back tears of relief. She insisted on paying me 10 silver coins. She said a major hospital in the capital would charge 100 times more. She pulled out the coins and shoved them into my hands. The fact that she showed me her savings so openly told me how much she trusted me. Doug Ray backed her up, saying his captain's salary could handle it. I took 1 silver coin and handed back 9. I told them I knew this was a significant amount for their family, and with a baby on the way, they'd need it. The 9 coins could be my gift to their future child. They tried to argue, but I wouldn't budge. They finally gave in, looking at me with an expression I couldn't quite read, something between gratitude and wonder. Mrs. Ryan thanked me sincerely and told me to come to them if I ever needed help. As I was leaving, 4 police officers in black uniforms showed up at the door. They'd come to check on their captain. The young brown-haired one recognized me immediately. "Aren't you the guy from Bayek? What are you doing here?" Mrs. Ryan explained everything. I'd come to measure a door, then somehow cured her husband. The officers exchanged confused looks. They knew their captain's condition wasn't ordinary, so a simple cure made no sense. I could tell they suspected I had magic or some kind of magical tool. The young one asked me directly how I'd done it. I repeated the sunflower pressure point story. They were only half convinced, but I didn't need them to believe me. I confirmed with Mrs. Ryan that I'd bring the finished door tomorrow, said goodbye, and left. One of them muttered, "Mysterious guy," as I walked out. I'd take that as a compliment. Upstairs, Captain Doug Ray skipped the pleasantries and went straight to business. The news was bad. While he'd been down, the kidnappers had gone wild, snatching children openly inside the town now. Families were storming the police station. His officers were completely overwhelmed. Doug Ray nearly passed out from rage. He cursed and shouted until his coughing forced him to stop. His men had never seen him lose composure like this. When he asked about reinforcements, they told him a level 2 knight named Tyler had been assigned, but he wouldn't arrive for about 10 days. Tyler was famously lazy, the most unmotivated knight in the region. No amount of complaints had ever fixed his work ethic. Doug Ray could already picture him riding slowly down the road, drunk, taking his sweet time. Over 20 children's lives hung in the balance, and their backup was a knight who couldn't be bothered to hurry. Doug Ray told his men to go back. He'd return to duty soon despite their protests about his health. Meanwhile, I drove home in a good mood, counting my earnings. After a quick meal, I went to check on Ravel at the pig pen. The pigs were squealing with hunger. The ground was scattered with weeds they wouldn't eat. Ravel had just tossed random grass in without chopping it properly. The kid himself was sitting under a tree, yawning comfortably. The moment he saw me, he grabbed a sickle and pretended to work. I told him calmly that since he hadn't listened to my morning warning, he'd face the consequences. Then I fed the pigs myself. That night, I deliberately made dinner only for Tia and myself. No food for Ravel. He acted tough about it. Fine, he wouldn't eat, and stomped off to sleep in his shed. A kid who'd never gone hungry in his life had no idea what was coming. Tia tried sneaking Ravel a piece of bread when she thought I wasn't looking. I appeared out of nowhere and snatched it right out of her hands, then bit into it myself while she glared at me with puffed-up cheeks. Nice try, but nobody was fooling my senses. That night, Ravel lay on his hard bed, stomach growling, unable to sleep. Between the hunger and the nighttime creatures outside, he was miserable, but he was still stubborn. One day without food wasn't going to break him. He curled up and eventually passed out. The next morning, I left early for Dude with the door I'd made for Mrs. Ryan plus more furniture to sell. I told Tia to pass along my message. If Ravel didn't do his job today, no food again. He immediately tried to get Tia to sneak him something, but I'd hidden every scrap of food in the house before leaving. She'd already searched everywhere. Nothing. I will never listen to him, he declared dramatically. His body was getting weak, though. He just didn't realize what real hunger felt like yet. While I was gone, something unexpected happened at home. A fancy carriage rolled into Bayek. The old man, Bol, had returned, and he'd brought company. A woman named Defa stepped out in a dark purple mage's robe, wearing a shiny mage badge, a red ruby necklace, and jewelry on her wrists and ears. She looked like she was glowing. Defa examined the town with professional interest, noting the chaotic magical elements and evil auras everywhere. She was impressed and concerned that so many dangerous beings lived here peacefully. She asked Bol if he wasn't afraid. He shrugged it off, saying he'd lived here for 5 years without problems. They noticed Ravel and Tia peeking out of my house. The two kids were terrified, especially of Bol's intimidating size. Tia whispered to Ravel asking if the old man might eat people. Ravel told her to shut up. When Bol knocked on my door and threatened to break in if they didn't open up, the kids nearly fainted from fear. Defa pushed him aside, used a spell to open the door herself, and greeted the children with a warm, gentle voice. Her noble bearing and kindness calmed them down enough to answer questions. They confirmed I'd gone to Dude for business and would probably be back today. Bol said he needed to leave. He was going to pick up his dog from a friend's house. Defa decided to wait for me. After Bol left, Defa looked at Ravel and noticed his condition. Beaten up, starving, clearly a noble's son fallen on hard times. She asked if I'd been deliberately mistreating him. Back at my house, Ravel tried to play Defa for a fool. He spotted her level 4 mage badge and immediately started crying fake tears, spinning a story about how I'd kidnapped him, extorted his family, forced Tia to serve me, and starved him no matter how hard he worked. Tia's eyes went wide. She was genuinely amazed at how well her young master could lie. Defa saw right through it. She told Ravel she could see the spoiled brat in his eyes. She'd seen that look countless times. He froze mid-sentence. "Oh my," Tia blurted out. "You saw through the young master's perfect disguise just like that." Ravel glared daggers at her. She slapped her hand over her mouth, but the damage was done. Defa laughed and called Tia adorable. She even jokingly offered to take Tia as her assistant. Tia politely refused, saying she'd been assigned to look after Ravel. Ravel couldn't believe she'd turned down a level 4 mage. In his mind, that was the stupidest decision imaginable. Defa told Ravel she wasn't getting involved in his family's dispute with me. Then she went back to her carriage to nap, saying the town's atmosphere was uncomfortable. Meanwhile, I was at Mrs. Ryan's house, finishing the door installation. It came out clean, and she was very satisfied. I asked about Captain Doug Ray. He'd already gone back to work despite not being fully recovered. His wife said she'd begged him to rest, but he was too stubborn. I asked if the kidnapping case was still going on. Then something made me ask whether the criminals knew where they lived. She found the question strange. Then I heard it, the front door lock being crushed from outside. A hand had simply squeezed through the metal. The door swung open and a man walked in, wearing a black felt hat and a leather trench coat. Mrs. Ryan shouted at him from the top of the stairs, telling him this was trespassing and ordering him to leave. She was scared but refused to show it. A police captain's wife had pride to uphold. The man ignored her completely. He poured himself a glass of water from her table, sat down, and smiled. He said his boss had sent him to kidnap her. With the captain's wife as a hostage, they could control Doug Ray and keep their plans running smoothly. Then his tone turned disgusting. He started making vulgar comments about her looks, suggesting she leave her husband for him, promising things that made her shake with fury and fear. I stepped in. "Ma'am, don't waste your energy on someone who's about to die. I'm actually quite good in a fight. You don't need to worry about your safety." She looked at me with concern, telling me not to be reckless and that this wasn't my problem. The trench coat man burst out laughing. "Good in a fight? Against street thugs?" He mocked me with exaggerated boxing poses. I ignored him and kept reassuring Mrs. Ryan that I could handle this with one hand. Being ignored wiped the smile off his face. His eyes turned cold, and he stared up at me with pure malice. "I was going to cut your head off quickly, painless, but now I've changed my mind. I'm going to break every bone in your body one by one, pull out your organs, and finally rip out your heart so you can watch it beat as you die. Then try," I said, and jumped down from the second floor. The trench coat man stood up lazily, cracked his neck, and bragged about some power he'd never had to use seriously. Then he lunged at me. Fast, I'll give him that. He thought I couldn't react. But my palm was already on his face before he realized what happened. His entire forward momentum reversed. When he came to his senses, I was holding him up by the face with one hand, his feet dangling off the ground. I turned to Mrs. Ryan, who was frozen in shock. "Ma'am, I don't want to mess up your house. I'll deal with him outside." I carried him out the door. The moment we got outside, dark purple smoke erupted from his body and his strength surged. I couldn't hold him with just one hand anymore, so I flung him away. The neighborhood was quiet. Every door shut, every window closed. The residents had heard the commotion and hidden. He got up, furious, and started transforming. Fangs grew from his mouth. Muscles swelled until his clothes were splitting at the seams. He credited some figure named Glass for giving him this supreme power. I clapped sarcastically. "Can't you people ever come up with something original?" I asked who Glass was. He ranted about Glass being a great being who would lead them to ultimate power. His devotion bordered on religious. Then he charged at me like a mountain falling forward. I ducked under his grab, shifted my weight, twisted, and side-kicked him in the gut. He flew backward, spitting bile. Every movement I made was precise and efficient, like a machine. "Your attacks are about as hard to read as a street thug's," I told him. Mrs. Ryan had come to the doorway. "Oh my God," she gasped. "Told you I could fight," I said with a grin. She shook her head. "This isn't just can fight, child. Don't try to fool me." The man staggered up again, bewildered that his enhanced body hadn't made a difference. I told Mrs. Ryan things were about to get bloody and reminded her she was pregnant. She reluctantly went back inside. The trench coat man tried threatening me, said his boss would come after me if I didn't back off. I laughed. "Weren't you going to rip my heart out? Getting scared now? Save it. You're not leaving." He panicked. He spun around, punched through a house wall, and dragged out a skinny man from inside. He held the civilian by the throat. "Let me go, or this innocent person dies." I looked at them for 2 seconds, then shrugged. "Fine. You win. Go ahead." He was stunned it worked so easily. "Smart choice," he said with a smug grin, backing away with his hostage. In his mind, he was already planning to kill the hostage the moment he was clear. He thought I was a naive kid. The instant he turned to run, my voice came from right behind his head, centimeters away. I lied, a flash of silver. Both his hands fell off at the wrists. The hostage dropped to the ground, pants soaked. The trench coat man stared at his bleeding stumps, screaming and crying. I told the skinny man to get inside. He crawled home on all fours. I crouched down next to the howling criminal. "I was going to follow you back to your hideout, but that seemed like too much trouble. Easier to just ask you directly. Where's your base? How many people? Your boss is called Glass, right? How strong is he? What happened to the kidnapped children?" He glared at me with pure hatred through his pain. "I'll never betray Lord Glass. You'll get nothing from me." I dragged the trench coat man into a dark alley. It took about 2 minutes before he was screaming and begging. Under my methods, even the most loyal dog would talk. Here's what I learned. A group of about 50 people, controlled by someone called Glass. Glass had somehow gained terrifying power. His appearance became monstrous. They'd been kidnapping children under 18. It was obvious Glass was just a puppet with someone pulling his strings from behind. I went back to Mrs. Ryan's house. She was waiting nervously behind the door. When she saw it was me, she relaxed and asked if I was hurt. I appreciated that she treated me the same as before, like a polite young man, not some monster to be feared. I told her the man was dangerous, so I'd killed him. Her hand trembled slightly, but she sighed and said it was what people like him deserved. She promised to explain everything to Doug Ray so I wouldn't face any trouble. I thanked her sincerely. Then I pointed at the smashed front door. "Looks like you need another new door, ma'am." She laughed bitterly. I told her I'd handle it, but I had something urgent to deal with first. I'd gotten the location of Glass's hideout from the trench coat man. It was hidden behind concealment magic. No wonder the police couldn't find it. A rundown bar serving as a front. I went in through the ground floor. There were plenty of Glass's men inside. By the time I reached the stairs, the floor was covered in blood. One man's head had punched through the second floor boards and was stuck there, still alive enough to croak, "Boss," at Glass. I walked upstairs with my hands in my pockets. Glass looked like an orc from a video game, but not green-skinned and not quite as bulky. I caught myself wondering if this world even had orcs. Dylan's memories said no. I shook off the thought. "You're the boss? Where are the children? Tell me, and I might let you live," I said. He ignored my question and demanded to know who I was and how I'd found them. I decided talking was pointless until I'd beaten him into cooperation. I extended my claws and slashed at him. He blocked with his forearm, and my claws rang against his skin like steel hitting steel. His body barely shifted. His skin looked normal but was hard as iron. He grabbed my wrist and hurled me at the wall. I stayed calm, adjusted midair, and caught the wall with both feet, absorbing the impact. Before he could try again, I pushed off the wall and drove my knee straight into his face. He let go. While he was blinded by pain, I swept his legs out, caught his falling body, and threw him through the window. Glass shattered as he flew out and crashed into the street below. Meanwhile, back at the police station, Dougray was mid-meeting when an officer burst in shouting that something had happened at his house. He jumped up and ran home with his men, on foot, since the town didn't even have police vehicles yet. One officer grumbled about needing a car, while another said their small town didn't deserve such luxuries. And somewhere in that wrecked bar's second floor, a strange disembodied voice had been talking to Glass before I arrived. It had been demanding more children, always more. Whatever was behind Glass, it was hungry and far from satisfied. Mrs. Ryan was waiting at the door when Captain Dougray arrived with his officers. She told him he needed to properly thank me. I'd saved her and their unborn child. After checking that she was unharmed, he listened to the full story. When he heard what I could do, he muttered about understanding how I could live in Bayek. Then it clicked. He realized I might have gotten information about the criminal's hideout. He ordered his men to track me down immediately. They were too late to catch up. I was already there. The fight with Glass had wrecked the bar. His body was covered in claw marks, and he was gasping for air. He was strong, but my combat experience kept him off balance the whole time. He screamed at the ceiling, calling for help from whoever was behind him. That was exactly what I wanted. I'd been holding back on purpose to draw out the real threat. A creepy, hollow laugh echoed around us. Glass's remaining men suddenly collapsed, their life force drained from their bodies, turning into a visible blood mist that poured into Glass's mouth. His power surged. Bone spikes grew from his back. 2 holes opened in his chest, pulsing like they were breathing. He swelled in size. I didn't interrupt his transformation. I was using every bit of my sensing ability to locate the source of that phantom voice. Glass roared and blasted a column of purple flame at me. I sprouted a thin layer of wolf hair for protection and dodged. The flame chased me as I ran circles around him, but my real focus was elsewhere, scanning below ground. Then I felt it, under a nearby well. "Found you," I said. I rushed straight at Glass. He grinned and drove a meter-long bone spike from his wrist toward me. I leaped high, raised my right arm, and let it transform, just the arm. My hand swelled into a massive wolf paw, big enough to grab his entire body. I slammed it down. His bone spike snapped like a twig against my fur. Glass was crushed flat. The phantom voice screamed in disbelief. "Impossible. How can someone this powerful exist in a place like this?" The ground started shaking. Something enormous burst out of the well, dirt and debris filling the air. When the dust cleared, I saw it. A massive flesh worm, its body made of stacked rings of meat. Its head was covered in eyes rolling in every direction, and its mouth was a nightmare of layered jaws. But what froze me was its belly. Dozens of semi-transparent white sacs hung there, and inside each one was a child, boys and girls, ages 2 to 14. Their eyes were open but weak, full of pain. Thread-like tendrils covered their skin, draining them. Some twitched faintly when they found a shred of strength. My chest heaved. I had to physically force down the rage before it consumed me. The worm laughed, its voice deafening. It told me these children were being drained of their purest life energy. It would squeeze every last drop from them, and they would die in agony. I looked up at that disgusting head. My voice came out flat, empty of emotion. "In a moment, you'll know what real pain feels like." I vanished, pure speed, and reappeared at the worm's belly, slashing at the children's prison. My claws hit a purple magical barrier. Blocked. The worm cackled. "You think beating one weak human means you can challenge me? You're just a slightly bigger insect. Who's the insect here?" I thought. "You're literally a giant worm." Then it said something that made me pause. "And even if you could reach them by brute force, the moment those children leave my body, they die instantly." The worm's threat made me stop. If pulling the children out would kill them, I needed to think carefully. This involved magic I didn't understand. I was completely out of my depth. The worm tried to get inside my head, using some kind of hypnotic voice. It offered me power and a glorious future if I'd join it. For a moment my thoughts went fuzzy, a false desire pushing me to agree. But the feeling was so fake that my battle-hardened mind rejected it instantly. Your mental resistance is that strong? The worm sounded surprised. I rubbed my forehead. You magic types are really annoying. Guess I need to get serious. I transformed. First into a 2-meter werewolf, then kept going. My body grew another 2 meters, black energy radiating from my fur. I was still much smaller than the worm, but my presence matched it completely. A level 5 werewolf? What are you? Its voice trembled for the first time. It had lived nearly 1,000 years and had never seen a werewolf whose transformation came in stages. The one who kills you, I said in a voice like a demon's. The battle was chaos. The worm spewed white silk that covered the entire area. I tore through it with my claws. It cast magic circles, fire, acid, ice, devouring spells, pouring everything onto me without pause. Dodging was impossible. I took the weaker hits and kept pushing forward. My only weapons were claws and teeth. But every time I struck the worm's body, layered defensive magic or reinforced skin blocked me. Any damage I dealt, it regenerated almost instantly. Its magical reserves seemed bottomless, a racial ability. A drawn-out fight would kill me. My current form burned through energy fast. But I stayed calm. The magic hitting me wasn't actually hurting much. Werewolves had natural magic resistance, and at my level, that resistance was multiplied several times over. I was probing, looking for one opening to end this. Then I noticed the children's sacks glowing. The worm was draining them faster now, fueling the fight. I had to finish this quickly. I had one risky idea. I deliberately created openings in my defense, drawing the worm's attention. It took the bait. Its massive jaws split open, charging up some devastating breath attack. The instant before it fired, I used my tail to launch myself forward and shoved my arm straight into its mouth. It gagged. It tried to bite down, but a level 5 werewolf's body was harder than anything its jaw muscles could handle. Then it realized there was no defensive magic inside its own mouth. Too late. I grabbed its jaw and ripped the entire mouth apart. Through the wound, I pumped massive amounts of controllable wolf toxin into its body. The toxin spread like cancer, consuming cells and multiplying, destroying tissue everywhere, except the belly area where the children were. I kept that zone clean. The worm thrashed and begged me to stop, but it couldn't shake me off. The pain was too intense for it to focus on casting spells. Eventually, its enormous body crashed to the ground, twitching with dying reflexes. Now came the delicate part. I had to figure out how the worm's biology worked to safely remove the children. I used the wolf toxin like a surgeon's tool, probing the tissue around each sac, learning the mechanism. It was challenging, but the worm's internal structure was simple enough for me to manage. I freed the first child. The sac detached and burst open. A small body lay on the ground, breathing weakly, eyes barely open, looking up at me. I repeated the process for every single one. Almost the moment I finished, I heard voices outside, Doug Ray and his officers. The concealment magic had died with the worm, so they'd finally found the place. They must have been searching the area for a while. Good. They could handle the cleanup. I grabbed a shirt off one of the dead bodies, pulled it on, and slipped away before anyone saw me. Behind me, a group of weak but alive children watched my back as I disappeared. Something about walking away from that scene stirred an old feeling, like the missions I used to run in my past life. I didn't linger on it. The job was done. Doug Ray and his officers rushed into the scene right after I left. I could hear him barking orders as I leaped across rooftops back to my dear cart. I fixed my hair, made sure I looked normal, and drove off. The fight had made me even more interested in learning magic. Watching that worm throw around fire, acid, and ice spells was like a new player watching high-level gameplay. I started daydreaming about combining magic with technology. On the road out of town, I spotted 3 carriages ahead, 2 loaded with furniture. Someone was moving. I sped up and recognized the passengers, Layla and her mother, Mrs. Deli. They looked worried and distracted. Neither noticed me until I called out. Layla was startled, then pleasantly surprised. Her mother greeted me too and apologized for never properly thanking me for saving her life. I asked if they were moving. Their smiles faded. Layla said they had to leave due to special reasons. I cut straight to it. Was it because of her father? Both of them went pale at the mention of him. I softened my tone and told them the good news. The police had taken down the criminal group. Her father had likely been arrested or killed. The kidnapped children had been recovered and were waiting to be claimed by their families. Mother and daughter gasped in unison. The driver flinched. They immediately ordered the carriages to turn around. Layla bowed to me over and over, more emotional than I'd ever seen her. I joked about whether they were canceling the move. Her face turned red, and she thanked me one more time before the carriages headed back to Dude. I continued home. Along the way, I passed 2 Bayek residents. Quiet, somber types like Black Crow. We didn't speak. That was normal here. Entering Bayek, I noticed an elaborate carriage parked outside the old man's house and an unfamiliar perfume in the air. Probably one of his acquaintances, so I wasn't worried. A tall, elegantly dressed woman stepped out. The mage Defa, though I didn't know her name yet. She studied me from head to toe like I was some rare specimen. "Are you the old man's friend?" I called out. She paused at, "Old man," then laughed. "Is that what you call him? That's quite rude. He doesn't seem to mind." I shrugged. Up close, she was beautiful with a mature charm, wearing a mage's robe. I knew mages lived long lives, so I couldn't help myself. "Are you his girlfriend?" She conjured a wand and tapped me on the head. "Do I look that old to you?" I grinned. "An old bull eating young grass isn't that unusual, right?" She stared at me, then burst into the most unrestrained laughter I'd heard, tears streaming down her face. Old bull eating young grass. I've lived so many years and never heard anything like that. Her serious professor image completely shattered. I invited her inside since the old man wasn't home. When I opened the door, Tia greeted me with a bow. I started to introduce Defa, then realized I'd never gotten her name. She told me to call her Lady Defa and mentioned she'd already met Tia and Ravel that morning. Tia confirmed and told me about Bol and Defa's earlier visit, including how the old man had broken into my house again. "That old man never learns," I muttered, still barging into my place whenever he feels like it. Defa walked into my house like she owned the place, very fitting for someone of her status. I went to the kitchen and we started talking. She got straight to the point. The old man had told her everything, that I was a werewolf, that I kept full rational control after transforming, and that I could even speak in wolf form. He clearly trusted her deeply. "So you two really aren't together?" I asked again. She warned me not to push that joke further. Then her eyes got this suggestive look, and she said if she were looking for a partner, she'd want someone young and strong, like me. I stared at her for a good 15 seconds. "You're using your looks to get something from me. What is it? Don't treat me like some naive kid. I can see through your game with my eyes closed." That caught her completely off guard. She'd expected me to either get flustered or eagerly agree. Instead, I'd called out her entire strategy. She tried once more, asking if I really wasn't tempted. I told her to stop. It wasn't going to work. Was she attractive? Obviously. But I wasn't the type to be led around by instinct. She studied me for a long time, then sighed. "Your composure really doesn't match your age. That actually does make me a little interested. No embarrassment at being caught." Impressive. She finally told me the truth. She wanted to study my body, understand why I could do things no other werewolf could. Any mage would go crazy over a specimen like me. "So you want to use me as a lab rat?" "No," I said flatly. She tried to offer irresistible conditions. I refused again. Letting someone study my body meant exposing every weakness. I wasn't that stupid. She gave up, though she left the offer open in case I changed my mind. The conversation shifted to something unexpected. She complimented the fruit juice I'd made and said it would sell well on the market. She'd traveled extensively and rarely tasted anything this good outside of elven settlements. That lit something up in my head. I started mentally planning whether opening a tavern could work. She finished her drink and said she was leaving since her mission had failed. She asked me to pass a message to Bol when he returned. As she climbed into her fancy carriage, I noticed the horse had white markings on all 4 legs that looked like socks. I blurted out, "Your horse is wearing white stockings." She turned back with a strange expression. I explained it was a type of thin white legwear. She said it didn't sound like anything decent and disappeared into the carriage. Women's intuition was terrifying. After she left, I asked Tia about Ravel. She said he'd actually gone to work this time, enthusiastically, even. I decided to go check for myself. At the pig pen, I found him slumped against a fence, staring at the pigs eating their feed. He kept swallowing, watching their food with desperate eyes. The pigs were actually eating properly this time. He'd done the job, but he himself hadn't eaten in 2 days. He was eyeing the pig slop, wondering if it tasted as good as the pigs made it look. Only his pride as a noble kept him from trying it. But that pride wouldn't last much longer. 2 days of real hunger was teaching him something no lecture ever could, what it actually felt like to be powerless and desperate. And those homeless people who went 3 days without food? He couldn't even imagine. Ravel didn't notice me walking up behind him. He looked pathetic, exhausted, starving, staring at pig food like it was a feast. But I didn't feel sorry for him. I checked his work instead. This time he'd actually done a decent job. Not perfect, but good enough. Not bad. You're learning, I said. He turned to me, barely able to speak. I did what you asked. Please, just give me something to eat. I tossed him a piece of bread. He didn't care about dignity anymore. He shoved it into his mouth in seconds and looked at me wanting more. I told him he'd get a proper meal at home. Back at the house, I had Tia help me cook. She was thrilled. She'd been dying to learn my recipes. Soon the kitchen was pouring out rich aromas that nearly drove the starving Ravel insane. When the food hit the table, Ravel lunged for it without waiting for permission. I smacked his hand away with my chopsticks. No matter how hungry you are, you wait. He sat obediently until I took the first bite, then dove in like a wild animal. I noticed Tia watching Ravel get scolded and looking quietly pleased. Then she caught herself and felt guilty about it. That girl was changing whether she realized it or not. After dinner, I sensed the old man returning. I went outside to meet him and asked about Defa. He told me straight. She was the chief mage of Batsy's main city magic tower. Batsy was the capital of the region that included both Bayek and Dude. A chief mage was someone even Dylan's wealthy family would have looked up to with reverence. He asked why I hadn't asked her to test my elemental affinity or take me as a student. I explained she'd wanted to use me as a research subject, so asking her for favors was out of the question. He said Defo wasn't the type to harm her subjects, but when I told him I didn't want anyone knowing too much about me, it made me feel unsafe. He actually paused and nodded with genuine respect. Good point. Then I nudged him and asked if he could introduce me to other mages. He saw right through me, said his connections weren't that valuable, and literally ran back into his house. I shouted after him, but got nothing. Cheap old man. Meanwhile in Dude, the town was buzzing. News about the rescued children had spread like wildfire. Families flooded the police station, crying, hugging their kids, cursing the criminals. Even bystanders were in tears. Layla was there with her mother. She'd been crying since she arrived, calling the police officers heroes for saving these children. But a nearby officer overheard and gave a bitter smile. The credit isn't ours this time. The real hero is someone else entirely. At the police station, Layla overheard a young officer named Jimmy let slip that the rescue wasn't the police's doing. The real hero was just one person. A senior officer shut Jimmy up before he could say more, but Layla and her mother had already caught on. Mrs. Deli praised the unknown hero. The celebration in Dude lasted almost a full day and night. The rescued children were acting strangely. They refused to talk, buried their faces in their parents' arms, and rejected everything unfamiliar. The parents assumed it was just extreme shock, and that time would heal them. Back in Bayek the next morning, I gave Ravel a thorough explanation of his daily tasks. This time, the kid listened carefully. Hunger was an excellent teacher. His defiant attitude was gone. I drove the deer cart to Dude. I still had a door to install at Mrs. Ryan's, and I wanted to scout locations for a potential shop. Mrs. Ryan greeted me warmly as usual. She gave me some yellow egg fruits from her basket. I installed the new front door quickly, same dimensions as the other doors, so no need to remeasure. I threw in a free lock as a bonus. She tried to refuse, but I told her that declining would make things awkward between us. Just as I was about to leave, Captain Doug Ray came home looking urgent. He relaxed when he saw me still there and asked to talk privately. We walked to a nearby plaza. He barely started his question before I cut him off. It was me. He went quiet for a long time. Then he said he'd been worried about me living in Bayek, but clearly he'd been wrong to worry. I told him he didn't need to fear me misusing my strength. I know, he said. Years on the job gave me an eye for people. First time I saw you, I could tell. You have a sense of justice. Then he shared something I didn't expect. He said his superiors had reacted unusually when they reported the incident, probably because of the giant worm. They were sending investigators who would likely try to find whoever did it. That could mean trouble for me. I told him evidence was what mattered, and they'd find none pointing to me. He warned me not to underestimate the people above. They didn't always play by the rules. He said he'd cover for me, but too many officers knew bits of the truth. Eventually, they'd trace it back to me. He suggested I leave town for a while until things cooled down. I appreciated the concern, but told him not to worry. When the time came, I'd handle it my own way. Doug Ray patted my shoulder and told me to come to him if I ever needed help. Then he rushed back to the station. A familiar voice called my name. It was Old Cat, one of my regular customers. Real name Dace Rodman, but everyone used his nickname. He was a day laborer who knew the town inside out. He complained that I hadn't sold pork in ages, and that the butcher had jacked his prices back up. He was practically begging me to slaughter another pig. I told him my black pigs couldn't handle frequent killing. I needed years to grow the herd. His face crumbled. Eventually, I gave in and said I'd sell meat again tomorrow, just not necessarily black pig. I'd hunt other animals instead. He nearly kissed me. I shoved him away just in time. When I mentioned I was looking for a shop to buy, his eyes lit up. He knew every available property endued from all his job hunting around town. He offered to guide me, and I accepted. It would save me hours. We spent the afternoon visiting every shop for sale or rent. We negotiated hard at each one, and between us we were a deadly bargaining team. But after seeing everything, I hesitated. The problem wasn't the shops, it was the market. There were already 3 taverns in town. Opening another here would mean scraping by at best. I wanted real money, not just getting by. I decided to buy a 2-story former tavern anyway. 2 gold coins plus 30 silver. I'd use it as a butcher shop and workshop instead of a tavern. For the tavern idea, I had a better location in mind. The teleportation door in my basement that led to Caladria, a much bigger city near the capital. Walking through town afterward, Old Cat and I noticed a mercenary convoy passing through. They were battle-worn, dented armor, bandaged wounds, exhausted faces, but still radiating enough killing intent to keep everyone at a distance. 3 mages marched among the fighters, which told me this was a serious outfit. What caught my eye was a cage in the middle of the convoy. Inside sat a girl in green forest-themed clothing, her head buried in her knees. Only the pointed tips of her ears were visible. An elf. This looked exactly like the slave trading scenes from every fantasy story I'd ever heard. Old Cat and I pressed against a wall to let the convoy pass. As one mercenary walked by, the closest to us, he suddenly lashed out with a whip and struck me across the body. It didn't hurt at all. I looked at him calmly. I could have dodged easily, but I'd chosen not to. If I let him hit me first, then anything I did back was justified. The mercenary was annoyed that I didn't react. He called me tough-skinned and raised his whip for another strike. I was already planning to beat him senseless and make him run naked around the town. But someone in the convoy barked at him to stop causing trouble. An Old Cat grabbed my arm at the same moment. He'd read my body language and could tell I was about to do something. In his mind, I was just a commoner who'd get destroyed in a fight with armed mercenaries. He pulled me back. It wasn't worth it, he thought. Even with police in town, the best I'd get was a small compensation payment. He didn't know I could have dismantled that entire convoy by myself. Old Cat was pulling me back with everything he had, and I knew he was trying to protect me. I couldn't push him off without revealing my strength, so I let it go, for now. The mercenary called Fong put away his whip and told me I was lucky, warning me not to cross his path again. I almost changed my mind about just beating him up. Maybe I should kill him instead. And those 3 mages in the convoy, I detected dark magic signatures on them. They weren't good people either. Old Cat was shaking, telling me how crazy it was to even think about fighting mercenaries. He told me stories about co-workers who'd tangled with powerful people and ended up ruined. I just nodded along. Telling him I could solo that entire convoy wouldn't have been believable. I asked him who these mercenaries were. He was surprised I didn't know, then remembered I was new to the area. He explained they worked for the Punk Earl's family, who operated along the kingdom's border, officially hunting magical beasts. But the real business was capturing exotic slaves for the Earl's sons. He looked at the caged elf girl and continued. The Earl's sons had put up a huge bounty for a living elf. Elves being the most beautiful race on the continent made them prime targets. These mercenaries had apparently pushed deep into a forest elf settlement to grab this one, taking heavy losses but succeeding. I asked whether kidnapping an elf so openly would anger the Sessi kingdom, the elven nation ruled by high elves, governing dark elves, frost elves, and forest elves. It was one of the world's major powers. Old Cat said the people behind this probably figured the elven kingdom wouldn't bother chasing down one forest elf. Typical noble arrogance. I was impressed that a common laborer like Old Cat understood geopolitics this well. Dylan's noble contacts had always dismissed commoners as ignorant and dirty. But Old Cat proved that was just upper-class delusion. I asked what would happen to the elf girl. Old Cat sighed and said I wouldn't want to know. I told him I did. Best case, she'd become a pet. If the owner got bored, she'd either be broken and fed to the family's war dogs or used to make wine. Apparently, there was a widespread belief that soaking an elf in alcohol could extend a person's lifespan, because elves lived for centuries. My blood was boiling. As a soldier, this kind of thing was exactly what I'd been trained to fight against. I looked at the convoy disappearing into the distance. My hands were itching. Time to get to work. I told Old Cat I needed to head home to check on my pigs. Before he could respond, I was already walking away fast. That evening, the mercenaries took over an entire tavern. They drank, argued about whose fault it was that men had died during the elf raid, and generally made a mess. Fong was shouting that the dead ones had been idiots who charged stupidly into elf archers. Their leader, a scarred man in savage-looking leather armor, sat apart, quietly drinking. When one of his mages asked whether operating so openly was wise, the scarred man glanced out at the caged elf girl in the courtyard. She turned her head just enough to show one eye, burning with hatred. Any trouble that comes is the client's problem, the scarred man said with a thin smile. We just do the job. While I was planning my move, the scarred leader was in the courtyard whipping the elf girl with a special magical whip. It didn't leave real wounds, but delivered double the pain. She trembled with every strike, but refused to make a single sound. That infuriated him. He wanted her to scream. She finally spoke, her voice shaking but fierce. She told them their crimes against her people were being watched by their mother, the forest that raised them, and that a reckoning would come. He laughed and said if her mother showed up, he'd deal with her too. Everyone around him laughed along. A single tear fell from the elf girl's face as she buried her head in her arms. I waited until past 1 in the morning. The mercenaries had been partying since evening, and most were drunk or asleep. I chose nighttime deliberately. If I took down a mercenary convoy in broad daylight, I'd become famous, and fame meant attention from people I might not be able to handle. I was strong, but I wasn't invincible. I knew that. From a tall rooftop, I studied the layout. Veteran fighters drank inside the tavern. New recruits stood guard outside. The 3 mages had surely set up alarm spells, which was my biggest concern since I couldn't detect magic. But I could observe. I tracked movement through the windows and figured out which rooms the mages were sleeping in. I crouched and let my leg muscles swell until my pants nearly split. Then I launched off the rooftop like a cannonball into the night sky. The roof collapsed behind me. Some man inside started cursing, but I dropped a bag of silver coins down to him. He shut up fast. I dove headfirst toward the tavern, caught myself at the last instant with my wolf arms, and landed silently, just a burst of wind scattering some debris. The mages felt something in their alarm spells, but weren't sure if it was a false trigger. They didn't raise the alert. That hesitation cost them everything. The first mage opened his door to check. My hand shot out, grabbed his neck, and snapped it. Dead instantly. The other 2 opened their doors almost simultaneously. A gust of wind. 2 clean cracks. Done. Level 2 mages. Impressive sounding, but their bodies were just as fragile as any humans. I chose neck snapping over claws specifically to avoid blood. Experienced mercenaries would smell it. I could have wiped out the entire convoy in minutes if I'd wanted. But that would have caused serious problems for Captain Dugray. He was a good man, and dumping a mass killing scene in his jurisdiction wasn't something I wanted to do. I stashed the 3 mage bodies in their rooms and headed for the courtyard where the cage was. The elf girl was asleep, having nightmares, from the look of it. When she opened her eyes and saw me standing outside her cage, she squinted but couldn't make out my face in the darkness. I grabbed 2 of the iron bars and pulled them apart. Her jaw dropped. These weren't ordinary bars. they'd been magically reinforced. Even a level 3 knight supposedly couldn't bend them by brute force. I knocked out the guards, slung her over my shoulder, and carried her to a corner outside the tavern's perimeter. Her hands and feet were still in shackles. I left those on deliberately. I didn't want her running off and complicating things. She stared at me with the same hatred she'd given the scarred man. She assumed I was just another human stealing her for myself. I went back to the tavern and returned carrying one more person. Fong, the whip-happy mercenary who'd struck me earlier that day. The elf girl asked who I was. The person saving you. Isn't that obvious? I said. She just laughed coldly. I tucked her under my arm despite her struggling and carried everyone to my dear cart outside town. The elk had been sleeping and looked annoyed at being woken up. Fong came to from the rough landing, cursing. I slapped him. Hard. Then again. He recognized my face and started threatening me. I kept slapping until his face was literally falling apart, and he couldn't form words anymore. The elf girl swallowed nervously watching this, even though she'd endured worse herself. I tied Fong's legs to a rope, attached the other end to the cart, and kicked him off. He screamed about his mercenary group finding me and getting revenge. But the fear in his voice was real. A man who'd spent his life torturing others was finally learning what it felt like. Adults take responsibility for their actions. You brought this on yourself, I said, and whipped the elk into a full sprint. Fong experienced what it felt like to be dragged across rough ground at high speed. His screams echoed through the night. By the time we reached Bayek's outskirts, it was nearly dawn. Fong's body had been disposed of before entering the forest. Only the drowsy elf girl remained on the cart, fighting sleep but too afraid to close her eyes. I walked over to her. She snapped awake, watching me like a cornered animal. I'm going to remove your restraints now, I said quietly. I'm saving you. Don't attack me, or I'll have to teach you a lesson. I raised my fist as a friendly warning. She said nothing. In her mind, this was just another human trick to win her trust. I ripped the iron shackles off her wrists and ankles with my bare hands and tossed them aside. There, you're free. She stood up silently and stretched her limbs. Her forest elf warrior armor was torn and filthy, but she was still strikingly beautiful. While I was looking at her, she suddenly attacked, spinning into a lightning-fast kick aimed straight at my head. I expected the attack. She'd been hostile toward me from the start. Just as I was about to block and teach her a lesson, her leg stopped, inches from my face. A breeze carrying the scent of forest passed over me. She stood there looking dazed for a moment, then slowly lowered her foot. The forest here told me you're innocent, she said. The forest told you? I've lived here for a while, and it's never said a word to me, I replied. I'd been chopping down its trees. If anything, it should hate me. She got angry. I'm 345 years old. Stop calling me a little girl. Well, that shut me up. I asked what her plan was. She didn't answer, just turned to stare into the dark forest, trying to reconnect with whatever she'd felt. After several failed attempts, she gave up, jumped off the cart, and started walking back the way we'd come. I didn't stop her. I just stated facts. This is human territory. An elf as distinctive as you will be captured again immediately. She kept walking. I continued. They'll put a dog collar on you, parade you at noble parties, show you off like a trophy. If you're lucky, they'll let you wear clothes. Her steps slowed. Some nobles don't even want you as a pet. They'll stuff you into a wine barrel. Imagine your family finding you like that someday, pickled in alcohol. And all because you were too proud to accept help right now. She stopped completely, stood there for a long time, then turned around, voice shaking. What exactly do you want to say? I smiled. Don't misunderstand. I just don't want my effort to go to waste. The punk family grabbed you openly. Word will reach the Sessi kingdom eventually, or your tribe will seek their help. A diplomatic delegation will come. You just need to stay hidden until then. This place, Bayek, is perfect. It's full of monsters and strange residents. Almost nobody dares come here. She considered this carefully. She could sense that this forest was unusual, alive in a way her homeland's forests were. A forest spirit had communicated with her here. Her ancestors always said forest spirits wouldn't harm their kind. I'll trust you for now, she said. Where should I stay? How would I know? I shrugged. You don't know? You brought me here, and you don't even have a plan? My expression went cold. Am I your father? I saved you, gave you advice, and you haven't thanked me once. You've been rude this entire time. If this is how all elves behave, maybe I should have left you to be someone's toy and wine ingredient. She opened her mouth to argue, then closed it. She knew I was right. She understood gratitude. Her people valued it. But days of torture and captivity had poisoned her feelings toward every human. She stayed silent. I turned back to the cart and said loudly, as if to myself, if all elves are like this, next time I see one being abused, I won't bother helping. Just as I was about to drive off, she called out. I was wrong. I looked back. What? Louder. I can't hear you. She scrunched up her nose, grinding her teeth behind closed lips. But she couldn't let one bad impression ruin her people's reputation. She raised her voice. She called me human male, an awkward title, but I let it slide. I grinned and said I'd thought elves never apologized, so it was nice to know they had at least a tiny bit of manners. She asked through gritted teeth where she could stay. I pretended to think it over and mentioned I had a place, but nothing comes free. She asked what I wanted. I need someone to feed my pigs, I said. She looked confused. I explained it wasn't anything sinister, just basic farm work. She was skeptical but agreed. It was her best option, and she knew it. Besides, I actually needed the help. Ravel would be getting a different assignment soon. By the time we reached my house, it was fully light. I'd been up all night, but felt fine. Gotaya, that was her name, was barely standing. Days of captivity and no sleep had taken their toll. I woke up Tia to give Gotaya her bed. The girl stumbled out half asleep, hair everywhere, dress sliding off one shoulder. I may have looked a second longer than necessary. Tia was reluctant to give up her bed until I offered her a silver coin. Her expression changed immediately, and she graciously accepted. Money really did work on everyone, myself included. Then Tia realized I'd walked into her room without permission and shrieked, pulling the blanket up to her chin. I backed out quickly, mumbling about being a gentleman normally. Gotaya watched me retreat with a very judgmental look. I told the elf girl to go sleep. She complained about how small my house was. I told her as long as it kept the rain out, that was enough. Meanwhile, across town, the scarred mercenary leader was waking up his men with his usual charm, banging on doors and yelling. When none of the three mages answered, he kicked a door down. He found a body, neck broken, slumped by the door. The other two were the same. He screamed at his men to check the cage. They rushed to the courtyard and found the guards knocked out, the cage bent open, and the elf girl gone. Then came worse news. Fong was missing too. The scarred man grabbed the messenger by the throat and crushed his neck in a fit of rage. 3 mages and his strongest fighter, gone in one night. He'd spent years building this mercenary company, and now it was crippled. Who did this? Why are you targeting me? He screamed at the empty air. Obviously, I couldn't hear him. I was at home, getting ready for breakfast. He ordered every available man to search the town and find whoever was responsible. Then he slumped down, face twisted with despair. How am I going to explain this to the client? The news spread through Dude like wildfire. Everyone in town was talking about the mysterious attack on the mercenary convoy. The news about the mercenary attack spread through Dude like wildfire. People in the streets were talking about who could have been bold enough to hit the Hunter mercenary group, backed by the powerful Punk Earl family. Some were delighted. One man complained about being whipped by them just yesterday. Others hoped whoever did it would stay safe. The mercenaries tried to shut people up by roughing up a few talkers, but with the police around, they couldn't go too far. I wasn't in town for any of this. I was home in Bayek, sorting out sleeping arrangements for my growing household and getting on with my day. Whatever chaos I'd caused was their problem now. Meanwhile at Mace Academy, things were much quieter. Behind those walls, the town's drama didn't reach the students. Bonnie approached her teacher, Mr. Smith, after class and asked if he knew anything about Bayek. He vaguely remembered hearing the name years ago, but couldn't offer much. She pretended it was just idle curiosity. Then she went to find Layla. She pulled her friend out of the classroom for privacy and said something that clearly shocked Layla. She wanted to visit Bayek again. The same Bonnie who'd been traumatized by her last visit was now asking to go back. Layla was stunned. Bonnie explained that I'd visited her at home and told her things that changed her perspective completely. Bonnie recounted our entire conversation, the guardian, the super big dog, everything. They got so absorbed they skipped their next class entirely. By the end, Layla was just as excited as Bonnie. She suggested they go tomorrow. Bonnie agreed nervously. On their way back to the classroom, They ran into Mayer and a group of male classmates who swarmed around Layla with concern about her missed class. She was used to this. Boys constantly trying to impress her was just part of her daily life. She found it childish, but was too polite to say so. Then a familiar voice came from behind. Pernis. She appeared in her elegant noble's attire, and every boy immediately fell silent. Compared to Layla, who was a beautiful commoner they could dream about, Pernis was on a level none of them would dare approach. Back at Mace Academy, Pernis came downstairs to find Layla and Bonnie, curious about what they'd been whispering about. Layla made up a story about Bonnie inviting her over, but Pernis clearly didn't buy it. She offered to share fancy cakes her uncle had brought, but the girls declined. They had plans for tomorrow. Pernis accepted the refusal gracefully. Despite Bonnie's constant coldness toward her, Pernis never showed any irritation. Nobody in the friend group understood why she was so patient with Bonnie. I slept from morning until noon and felt completely refreshed, probably a werewolf thing. Downstairs, Tia was sitting around with nothing to do. I'd recently suggested she just tie her hair in a simple ponytail instead of the complicated style she'd been doing. With her cute face, it gave her a schoolgirl look. She jumped up when she saw me and started explaining she wasn't being lazy. The house was just already clean. I asked about Ravel. He'd gotten up early, eaten breakfast, and gone straight to work at the pig pen. Progress. I grabbed some cold leftovers and ate quickly. I was about to go check on Ravel when I noticed Tia mindlessly wiping an already spotless table. This girl had been cooped up for days. She'd told me earlier that her previous master, Channies, had never allowed servants to leave the estate grounds. Since being sold to his family, she'd never been anywhere else until I took her and Ravel away. Tia, want to come to dude with me? I asked. Her face went through about 5 emotions in 2 seconds. Surprise, excitement, shyness, disbelief. Are you joking with me, mister? Glenn? I told her I was serious, and we should get going. She stammered about changing clothes, but I told her we weren't going to a ball. On the way out, she remembered Gotaya sleeping inside and asked if it was okay to leave her alone. I told her not to worry about the elf at all. Walking through Bayek still made Tia nervous. She drifted closer to me for safety. We stopped by the pig pen first. Ravel was out in the forest with Night Howl, collecting pig grass. Nobody was watching the pigs. I sighed dramatically, looking at my tiny pig pen. Such a vast family business, yet no one to manage it. Tia looked at the pen, smaller than her servants' quarters back at the Channies estate, and clearly had no idea if I was being serious about calling this a family business. I checked the pigs, then told Tia to wait while I disappeared into the forest. In under a minute, I was back with a large animal slung over my shoulder, something like an oversized roe deer with a small horn on its forehead. Tia asked what it was. I honestly didn't know, so I just called it a silly deer, using a Chinese word. She found the name strange, but couldn't come up with anything better. I processed the animal quickly, loaded it onto the cart, hitched up the elk, and we headed for Dude. On the way, I reminded Tia to buy Ravel some new clothes. His noble outfit was filthy after days in the forest. She asked if she could use her 2 silver coins. I told her plain commoner clothes wouldn't cost much. Somewhere back in the forest, Ravel was grudgingly cutting pig grass with Night Howl dozing nearby. He'd accepted his fate, but still complained under his breath. Whenever the beast looked away, he'd sneak breaks to collect large black beetles and watch them fight each other. He found it more entertaining than any game he'd played as a noble. His expensive clothes were torn and dirty now, but he'd stopped caring. Some things you just get used to. Entering Dude, Tia's mood transformed completely. The buildings, shops, and crowds fascinated her. When we passed a bakery, her eyes locked on and wouldn't let go. I stopped the cart and told her to go buy whatever she wanted. She leaped off and came back hugging a paper bag stuffed with different breads. I declined her offer to share. I'd tried them all before. She bit into one eagerly, then another. Her expression faded each time. The taste didn't match her expectations. After being spoiled by my cooking, regular bakery bread wasn't going to cut it anymore. She quietly decided to save the rest for later. We arrived at the tavern I'd bought yesterday. I unlocked it, hauled out some junk, and set up a butcher's stall right outside the front door. Tia helped carry things despite her small frame. The girl was hardworking. I'd give her that. I started calling out to passers-by, and a crowd gathered fast. Returning customers were thrilled to see me selling meat again. New faces joined in. The price was the same as before, far cheaper than on the butcher's inflated rates. Someone asked what kind of meat this was, since it wasn't black pig. I told them I'd already tasted it, and it was good. That was enough. People who'd been hesitating rushed in. They knew this was a rare chance. Once I stopped selling, prices would shoot back up. Tia watched from the side as coins piled up in my hands. Copper and silver, one customer after another. Her mouth hung open. She was clearly thinking, making money is this easy? While I was busy selling meat, two mercenaries from the hunter group were watching me from a distance. I'd spotted them immediately. Old habits from counterintelligence work never die, but I didn't care. Let them look. I heard their conversation with my sharp ears. The bald one wasn't sure I was their target. The thin, weasel-faced one, Zamet, recognized me as the person Fong had whipped yesterday. They debated whether to confront me, but decided to report back first. Smart enough not to become cannon fodder. Business wrapped up by evening. I'd kept some of the best cuts aside for old Cat, who came sprinting over the moment he heard I was selling. He bought everything I'd saved, 15 Bella for 55 coppers, with a small discount. He was thrilled. He noticed Tia standing next to me and asked who she was. I said she was a maid from a noble friend's household. Old Cat pulled me close and whispered a warning. Some nobles befriended commoners with hidden motives. I told him not to worry, the relationship wasn't deep. He introduced himself to Tia with surprisingly polished manners, smooth words, proper posture. The man had clearly practiced social skills somewhere along the way. More to him than met the eye. After Old Cat left, Tia and I packed up and headed home. Back at the Mercenaries' Tavern, the scarred leader was sitting in a dark corner with his fingers pressed against his forehead. He'd been like that for a long time. Losing 3 level 2 mages, Fong, and the elf prisoner was catastrophic. He was trying to figure out how to face the punk family's wrath. When Zamet and the bald man came to report their sighting, the scarred leader cut them off before they could finish. He was tired of hearing about suspects. He only wanted actionable information. When Zamet suggested ambushing me outside town where there'd be no witnesses, the leader told them to take some men and test me. Zamet protested. If I really was the attacker from last night, they'd be walking into death. The scarred leader exploded, screaming at them to figure it out themselves. They scrambled out of the room. Alone again, he muttered to himself about maybe leaving the punk family's service entirely. The pay was terrible anyway. Meanwhile, back at my house, Gotaya woke up alone. Everyone was gone. She walked to the front door and opened it, only to find a strange, gloomy-looking man standing right outside, staring directly at her. While I was away, Gotaya had woken up to an empty house. She stepped outside and ran into Black Crow standing right there, staring at her. She instinctively reached for a bough on her back, but of course it wasn't there. Black Crow just turned and walked away into the fog without a word. She decided to explore the town and headed deeper in. The old man, Bull, came out of his house with a steaming cup, took one look at her, and said flatly, "If you don't want to die, stay away from the town center." Then he went back inside without another word. That warning planted a seed of dread. She could feel something terrifying lurking deeper within Bayek. Combined with the creeping sensation of being watched from all directions, she panicked and hurried back to my house. On the road home, 2 mercenaries followed our deer cart on horseback, the bald one and the weasel-faced Zamet. I heard every word of their conversation with my sharp ears. Zamet had no intention of actually confronting me. His plan was brilliant in its laziness. Follow at a distance, never make contact, then go back and tell their boss they'd investigated and confirmed I wasn't the culprit. That way, when the client's anger came down, it wouldn't land on them. The bald one was genuinely impressed by this scheme. I had to admit, it was clever. I almost laughed out loud, but only let the corner of my mouth twitch slightly. Tia noticed and asked what was funny. I told her I'd thought of a joke and shared a few from my past life. She had the lowest humor threshold I'd ever seen. One simple joke, and she was doubled over, tears streaming down her face. Her laughter was so loud the mercenaries behind us heard it and got confused. They gave up tailing us before we reached Bayek. Exactly as planned, their plan, not mine. I sent Tia home and went to the pig pen. Ravel was there, methodically scooping feed into the trough. He didn't even notice me arrive. It reminded me of rural life from my old world, minus the noble's outfit. When I told him he wouldn't be doing pig duty starting tomorrow because I'd found a replacement, His reaction surprised me. Instead of relief, he looked reluctant. Why? I've only been doing this a few days. I know I haven't been perfect, but I stared at him. Aren't you supposed to hate this work? His face went red to his ears. He stammered something about his father teaching him to finish what he started. I didn't believe a word of it, but I didn't push. I just told him the new assignment wouldn't take long, and he could come back to the pigs afterward. Fine, he mumbled, clearly embarrassed. Night Howl was nearby eating some animal it had caught, watching our exchange like a spectator at a show. After checking the pen, I went to my logging area to build a shed for the lumber. Rain would ruin the wood if I left it exposed. Back in Dude, the hunter mercenary group spent the entire day searching for me and found absolutely nothing. By nightfall, the scarred leader gathered everyone for a report. The conclusion: 0 leads. He raged for nearly an hour straight, slapping and kicking his men between insults. Zamet stood in the back, head bowed, silently marveling at one thing. His boss's vocal stamina was truly remarkable. While the scarred leader, whose name turned out to be Snock, was mid-rant at his men, the door blew open. An old gentleman walked in, wearing a tailcoat, a black top hat, and carrying a cane. A black bird of prey sat on his shoulder, its eyes glowing red. This was Black Sword, a dark mage assigned by the Punk family to protect one of their sons. The young master had gotten impatient waiting for his elf, and sent Black Sword to collect her personally. Black Sword looked around the empty cage and the beaten-down mercenaries with cold contempt. He called Snock an inferior person who couldn't handle a simple task. Snock, to his credit, used a cheap trick that actually worked. He taunted Black Sword, daring the mage to find the culprit himself. The old mage's pride took the bait completely. Black Sword raised his cane and unleashed black wind that sent mercenaries flying. He floated into the air, chanting spells over the empty cage in the courtyard. After a dramatic display, he landed with a satisfied smile. He'd found a trace. The person who did this knows nothing about magic, Black Sword explained. They cleaned up physically but left everything exposed on the magical level. It was almost too easy. Snock's eyes lit up with murderous excitement. Then let's go right now? I've already planned exactly how to make that bastard suffer. They didn't know they were heading toward Bayek. That evening at home, I cooked a big dinner for everyone. Knowing Gotaya only ate vegetables, I made several vegetable dishes with dipping sauces. She acted unimpressed at first, bragging about how superior elven food was. Tia and Ravel drooled listening to her descriptions. But after one reluctant taste, Gotaya admitted it wasn't as terrible as she'd imagined. When Tia begged to try elven food someday, Gotaya got flustered and said elven cuisine wasn't for human consumption. I could tell she was bluffing. Her own cooking probably couldn't compare. Ravel made the mistake of scolding Tia for acting like a commoner, instead of maintaining proper servant etiquette. I shut him down immediately, reminding him he was in no position to put on noble airs here. He shrank into his seat, trembling. I told Tia that formal manners were for formal occasions. In my house, she could relax. After dinner, Gotaya mentioned that Black Crow had come by looking for me. I made a mental note to visit him tomorrow. I'd given Gotaya a room on the second floor. My small house now held 3 residents, 4 counting Ravel in the shed. I briefly considered that the basement could fit 2 more if needed. I'd barely fallen asleep when Night Howl's howl rang through my mind, a warning signal through our link. I snapped awake, threw open the window, and jumped straight down to the street. The nighttime creatures scattered in every direction. I sprinted toward the forest without stopping. As I got closer, I heard it, thundering combat sounds and Night Howl's pained cries. Someone was attacking my beast. I reached the forest to find chaos. Trees were shattered everywhere. Mercenaries were chasing Night Howl through the woods, and my beast was covered in wounds that weren't healing properly. Some kind of magic was suppressing its regeneration. The old gentleman, Black Sword, was floating on wind magic above the chase, casually watching. His blackbird sat on his shoulder with glowing red eyes. He'd created floating light orbs so the mercenaries could hunt in the dark. He was talking about capturing Night Howl as a rare specimen, calling it a mutation from eating werewolf flesh. Snock was leading the ground pursuit with a chain hook. He caught Night Howl's flesh with a well-timed throw and yanked it off balance. Night Howl crashed down, and the mercenaries swarmed in. My beast snapped its massive jaws at the closest attacker. The man barely dodged. The sound of those jaws slamming shut made everyone back off and switch to ranged weapons. Black Sword got impatient and formed a wind blade to slice off Night Howl's mouth. But before he could throw it, his danger instincts fired. I was already on him. His bird reacted first. Its wings exploded outward like a shield, covering the old mage completely. My claws struck the feathered barrier with a sound like metal smashing metal. The impact sent both bird and mage flying. The wings retracted, revealing scratch marks smoking on the feathers. I landed beside Night Howl. The ordinary mercenaries around me were already down. I'd torn through them on my way in. Only Snock and 3 stronger fighters were still standing, drenched in cold sweat. "Was it you who stole our cargo?" Snock demanded, voice shaking. "Cargo? Oh, the forest elf. Yes, she's with me. I'm not giving her back. What are you going to do about it?" He exploded, screaming about how their backers were beyond my imagination, threatening terrible punishment. I yawned internally and told him the punk family was just an earl's house. I'd dealt with earls before. I wasn't impressed. Black Sword stepped forward, clothes and hair magically pristine again. He called me ignorant and told me to die. He threw a windblade energy ball at me with terrifying destructive power. I flung Night Howl to safety and dodged. I could feel this one would pierce even werewolf-grade magic resistance. Dangerous. But he was only level 3. I didn't need to transform. His second spell came immediately, spinning black wind rings curving toward me like buzzsaws. I weaved through them easily, closing the distance. He panicked and threw a massive corrosive net. I slashed through it with one swipe of my claws. Anything that wasn't those piercing wind blades was nothing to me. Desperate now, Black Sword channeled his strongest spell. I felt a lock-on sensation. Something unavoidable was coming. A giant black arm materialized behind him, plunged into the ground, and pulled out an enormous broken knight's sword dripping black liquid. It swung at me with devastating force. I couldn't dodge the giant black sword, so I fully transformed both arms and caught the blade between my wolf claws. The force behind it was shocking, enough to overwhelm a level 4 knight. The black liquid dripping from the blade burned like acid. But the spell only lasted about a second before dissolving. Powerful, but extremely brief. Black Sword realized he'd picked a fight he couldn't win and started chanting an escape spell. I was already charging. Before he finished the incantation, I was on him. "Save me, baby," he screamed. His black bird exploded in size, growing to the scale of a griffin, and swallowed me whole. Inside its mouth, I didn't panic. I extended my claws and punched straight through the bird's chest from the inside. My arm kept going, piercing through Black Sword's chest on the other side. He coughed blood, eyes full of desperate clinging to life, then collapsed. I tore my way out of the dead bird, shrinking back to normal size. So much for not needing new clothes again. Snock and his 3 remaining fighters were terrified. He immediately dropped all bravado and started begging, calling me friend, promising to leave the punk family, offering anything I wanted. The other 3 chimed in with their own desperate pledges. I said nothing, just walked toward them. Snock's eyes went hard. He threw a smoke bomb. Through the black fog, a magic-enhanced dagger shot at my throat. I slapped it away, reached into the smoke, and grabbed the attacker. One punch ended him. The remaining 3 attacked from different angles simultaneously. I grabbed the first one's weapon and used him as a bat to sweep the second, then kicked the third. 2 went flying. 1 died in my grip with a broken neck. I caught up to the other 2 easily. 1 claw each. Done. Every attacker dead. I searched all the bodies and took everything valuable. Black Sword had the most interesting items, strange magical objects I couldn't identify but knew were useful. No storage rings though, which was disappointing. Night Howl was lying nearby, panting, tongue hanging out. Weak but alive. I checked its wounds, healing slowly because of whatever magic Black Sword had used, but not fatal. I tried using my wolf toxin to help, but Night Howl's toxin wasn't under my control. Forcing a change could kill it. I'd have to find another way to strengthen my beast later. "You did well leading them away from the pig pen," I told it. Night Howl had deliberately drawn the fight away from the livestock. Smart and loyal. I'd remember that. The next morning, Tia knocked on my door saying Ravel and Gotaya were waiting for their assignments. I trimmed my hair shorter using wolf toxin to control the growth. No razor needed, and went downstairs. I took them both to the pig pen. When Gotaya saw the setup and heard the job description, She erupted. You want a great elven warrior to do this. What's wrong with it? I'm stronger than you and I do it too, I said with a shrug. Stronger than me? She scoffed. Don't think beating a few mercenaries makes you impressive. If I hadn't been captured, they'd have been nothing to me. I gave her my best deadpan look. And yet you got captured. They only caught me because they were sneaky. There were 3 mages working together. Gotaya stomped her foot. I stopped arguing and threw a punch that halted right in front of her face. The wind from it blew her hair back. Her pupils shook. Those 3 mages? I killed them all. And last night, the entire mercenary group showed up near here. I killed them too, including a level 3 dark mage. I patted her shoulder lightly. After that, she stopped arguing about any of my instructions. Next, I took Ravel to the tavern I'd bought in Dude. I handed him a key and told him his job today was recruitment. I'd made a wooden sign with hiring information carved by my claws and painted with some colors and cartoon drawings. It attracted a crowd, mostly kids drawn to the cartoons. I explained my requirements to Ravel. No one too old, too weak, or disabled. I'd come back that evening to review his selections. He nodded seriously. Before leaving, I reminded him that if anyone caused trouble, he should go to the police station. Captain Doug Ray knew me, and no pulling noble attitude. If he got beaten up for acting superior, that was his own fault. Outside the tavern, I caught a familiar scent. I turned and saw 2 people quickly spin around to face away from me. I walked over. If you want to go see him, just go. I won't stop you. They flinched. When they turned around, both were wrapped up in plain clothes with covered faces. Lord Channies and Lady Sophia, trying to check on their son. We only wanted to see Ravel. We absolutely don't mean any offense, Channy said carefully. Sophia echoed him frantically. I told them they could visit, but warned them not to cause any trouble. My patience with nobles was limited. They swore on their family honor and rushed inside the moment I left. Back home, I grabbed a box of cakes I'd bought and headed deeper into Bayek for the first time to visit Black Crow. His scent was faint in the fog, but it led me to a gray-blue house with old-fashioned architecture. He opened the door with his usual expressionless face. You came, my friend. Please enter. I handed him the cake box as a gift. Inside, his home was run down. Ancient walls, creaking floorboards, a single dim lamp hanging in the living room. He poured me a glass of some unknown alcohol from Dude. It tasted weak, but drinkable. I asked about his wife. A woman's voice called from an inner room, older sounding, asking who had come. Black Crow told her it was me, then explained that his wife couldn't move around easily. She asked if I could come in and let her see me. Black Crow nodded his permission. I followed him inside. Even though I'd prepared myself for anything, what I saw still made my eyelid twitch. His wife was lying on the bed, her body grotesquely twisted, limbs tangled together like knotted tree roots. I couldn't tell which parts were arms and which were legs. Everything was wrapped around itself like a ball of yarn. A bedside lamp illuminated everything except her face, hidden behind hanging hair. Forgive the sight, honored guest, she said in a self-deprecating tone. I snapped out of my staring immediately. I'm the one who should apologize, ma'am. Black Crow's wife laughed gently and said my cake had come 2 days early. Her birthday was the day after tomorrow. That's why Black Crow had tried to visit me before, to invite me. I promised I'd come back on her birthday and bake her something even better myself. She asked me to step closer. A twisted, wood-like arm reached out from the tangled mass of her body and brushed hair from her face. In the dim light, I thought her eyes brightened. I can see you're different from others, she said. My husband and I are honored to know you. I didn't fully understand what she meant, but I thanked her politely. Then she drifted off to sleep mid-sentence. Back in the living room, Black Crow told me his wife had once been the most beautiful woman in her hometown. An evil force from underground had attacked her, leaving her like this. He'd killed the thing responsible and sworn to protect her forever. Then he asked what I really came to learn about. He'd known all along I had questions. I asked how much he knew about Bayek. He'd lived here a long time, longer than most outer residents. When he first arrived, the buildings were ancient and evil creatures roamed the forests outside. Over the years, those creatures either killed each other or were slaughtered by new residents who moved in. The last one he'd seen was a troll named Abu. I told him I'd already killed it. Every 4 or 5 years, a group of strangely dressed people would come and repair or modernize the town's buildings. That explained why a supposedly ancient town had relatively modern-looking structures, including the mansion next to my house. The most important details: the town's original residents were all under some kind of curse, unable to leave their homes. They stayed voluntarily or involuntarily, keeping the town mayor company forever. And the kingdom's leadership knew about Bayek and had special legal protections in place for it. As long as I didn't cause trouble in the town center, I'd be fine. That was enough for me to know. As we left, Black Crow pointed to a 3-story house nearby, saying an old resident lived there, a friendly one who kept trying to invite him over. Right on cue, a window flew open and a girl's head popped out, waving excitedly. "Hi, are you a new resident? Welcome to Bayek. I'm Cecily. Want to come visit? I have lots of fun things." "Please, please," I politely declined and got out of there fast. She called after me cheerfully, making me promise to come next time. Later that day, Layla and Bonnie were setting off on their trip to visit me. Layla had ditched her usual skirt for a fitted top and long brown pants, practical for running if they encountered danger again. Bonnie worried she'd be the slow one in her skirt. Layla linked arms with her and smiled. "Don't worry, I'll pull you along when we run." They both laughed. That afternoon, Layla and Bonnie were walking through the countryside toward Bayek, chatting and laughing. What they didn't notice was 3 people sneaking behind them: Pernis, Poke, and Mayor. Pernis had figured out they were hiding something and insisted on following. The boys tried to talk her out of it, worried about her mother's reaction, but she shut them both down and called them cowards. At the pig pen, Gotaya had finished feeding the pigs and was shooting arrows at a target carved into a tree trunk with a crude bow she'd made. Perfect shots every time, but she looked down at her work clothes and sighed. If my friends could see me now. I came strolling over and checked on things. While working on expanding the pig pen, I asked Gotaya if she was upset about me chopping down trees. She looked at me like I was stupid. "Forest elves cut trees too," she said. "Their mother permitted it. As long as you didn't clear cut without respecting the forest, nobody cared." She called my assumption a stereotype. I learned something new. Then Night Howl's ears perked up. I caught familiar scents: Layla and Bonnie approaching, plus 3 more people trailing behind them. I walked out to meet the girls on the road. They were excited. Bonnie wanted to see Night Howl, and she'd told Layla about the Guardian. Both were eager to meet it. I warned them it looked scary. Bonnie didn't care. "We want to see it." Then I called out toward the bushes behind them. "Are the ones hiding back there coming too?" Layla and Bonnie spun around just as the bushes rustled. I was already standing above the 3 stowaways before they could react. "Are we really not exposed?" I said from directly above their heads. All 3 screamed and tumbled out of the bushes. Pernis, Poke, and Mayor, covered in dirt, looking ridiculous. Layla was confused by the whole situation. Pernis jumped up and pointed at me furiously. "How dare you scare me? Maybe your courage is just too small," I said innocently. Layla stepped between us and confronted Pernis about following them. Pernis shot back that as a friend, she deserved to know what they were hiding. Layla said she'd been trying to protect her. This place wasn't safe, and her mother would be furious. While those 2 argued, Bonnie tugged my sleeve and whispered conspiratorially, "Mr. Glenn, Pernis is a noble. They're all bad. Don't be friends with her. This girl and her grudges." I leaned down, covered my mouth, and whispered back, "Yeah, I think so too." Poke and Mayor stood off to the side, completely lost, not sure what to do with themselves. The 2 girls kept arguing until I finally interrupted. "Do you want to see the big dog or not?" Pernis turned on me.